Chapter 21, Tony Stark. Jennifer, make a call to Tony Stark. Sure, boss. As the chairman of Stark Industries, Tony Stark rarely dealt with day-to-day matters. Currently, all the affairs of Stark Industries were being managed by the company veteran, Obadiah Stane, who was also the second largest shareholder of Stark Industries. Obadiah Stane left a favorable impression on Fang Ye. Fang Ye had met him several times and had chatted with him. Talking to him gave Fang Ye a refreshing feeling. He was a typical successful businessman. Moreover, Obadiah Stane was quite capable. His contributions were indispensable to the rapid development of Stark Industries over the years. I wonder when Obadiah will make a move against Tony. Suddenly, something crossed Fang Ye's mind, and he couldn't help but smile strangely, muttering to himself. Because Fang Ye knew that not long after, Obadiah Stane would hire someone to assassinate Tony. Unfortunately, Tony not only survived the attempt but also invented the Iron Man armor to save himself from adversity. Knowing the original plot, Fang Ye had been waiting for that day to come. Because after Tony Stark's return, he would announce the closure of the weapons manufacturing department. At that time, Stark Industries stocks would plummet, and Fang Ye could take advantage of the opportunity to make a large amount of money effortlessly. Moreover, during Stark Industries' decline, Fang Ye could also purchase shares on a large scale. At least Fang Ye had the confidence to replace Obadiah Stane and become the second largest shareholder of Stark Industries, rather than holding a pitiful 3% of the shares as he did now. As for taking over Stark Industries completely, Fang Ye never thought about it because without Tony Stark, Stark Industries would become worthless. The reason why Stark Industries became one of the world's largest arms manufacturers was because its soul was Tony Stark. There was no denying that Tony Stark had many flaws, but undoubtedly, he was one of the most talented scientists in the world. Many of Stark Industries' high-tech products were mostly invented by Tony Stark. It was hard to imagine what Stark Industries would become without Tony Stark. Just like the UI Foundation, without Fang Ye, not to mention whether the foundation would fall apart, but it would undoubtedly plummet from its position of reverence. And falling from grace was just the beginning. Eventually, the UI Foundation would probably descend into a second or third-rate foundation. That's why Fang Ye never thought of taking over Stark Industries. Anyone could take over Stark Industries, but one thing they couldn't lack was Tony Stark. Boss, the call is connected, but no one is answering. Keep trying. Fang Ye knew Tony Stark well enough that the playboy probably hadn't even gotten out of bed yet. He might be cuddling with a beautiful woman on the bed. In the luxurious seaside villa belonging to Tony Stark, the intelligent program JARVIS woke him up again from his slumber. Sir, Mr. Ye has called again. Oh, damn it. Can't he let me sleep peacefully? Connect the call. If I don't answer, he'll keep calling endlessly. Yes, sir, your inference is correct. Mr. Ye has called again. Although JARVIS was just an intelligent program, it was different from other programs. Sometimes it was quite human-like, although it didn't have human emotions, it could think on its own. On the video call, Fang Ye's face showed a faint smile. Good morning, Tony. I hope I'm not disturbing you. If I did, I apologize. Yeah, you know I hate being disturbed in the morning. What's the matter calling me so early? I want to go back to sleep after this call. You know I didn't sleep well last night. Well, actually, I do have something to talk to you about. You may not know, but I've gotten into some trouble recently. Oh, who's causing trouble for you? Tony Stark suddenly became interested, and it seemed that his sleepiness vanished instantly. Because Tony Stark was well aware that there weren't many forces or individuals that could cause trouble for Fang Ye, and he knew very well how much power was behind Fang Ye. Although it couldn't compare to Stark Industries, a deeply rooted old power, in the past couple of years, under Fang Ye's leadership, UI Foundation had become a giant, and no force dared to underestimate it. Tony, are we friends? Of course. Yeah, you know you're my only confidant. We share common interests and hobbies, don't we? Tony Stark didn't have many friends, but among them, there was only Fang Ye who shared the same carefree and woman-loving temperament as him. Of course, Tony Stark would never admit it was because they were like-minded. Although many people said that about them. I've run into some trouble recently, and I need your help. What can I do to help? I need a sub-program of JARVIS. You may not know, but recently, there have been many spies and agents infiltrating the UI tower. When manpower is insufficient, I need an intelligent program to help manage things, and you're the only one who can help. Well, okay. I'll sell it to you then, or let you borrow it for a while. Thank you. Let's have a drink when you're free. Same place, the Wind Night Bar, how about it? Sure, I like that place. In fact, the two of them had met at the Wind Night Bar, but they didn't get along at first. Later, they accidentally found that they had similar interests and became good friends. They would sometimes go hunting together. It was also a good way to relax. After finishing the call with Tony Stark, a smile appeared on Fang Ye's face. With the subprogram of JARVIS, UI Foundation's defense capabilities would immediately increase by several levels. At least those spies and agents wouldn't find it so easy to infiltrate UI Tower anymore. However, Fang Ye was also afraid that Tony might leave a backdoor. After all, he had a history of designing a program for SHIELD, and he had left a backdoor in the program. But the research lab used a LAN, and Fang Ye wasn't afraid of the lab's secrets being exposed. Now, the only thing Fang Ye could do was to delay as much as possible and wait for the human enhancement potion and the Hulk serum to be perfected. As long as the fusion of the Hulk serum was successful, all the troubles would be solved. The only concern was that other forces might not give him enough time. If the fusion of the Hulk serum proved to be hopeless, then Fang Ye could give up the idea of the Tesseract. Returning to the real world would also become an unattainable dream. In the Marvel world, power was essential, even more important than influence. Without power, you couldn't even think of touching the Tesseract. It was almost like seeking death. Even if Fang Ye's influence was huge, could it compare to the United States government? If he really touched the bottom line of the US government and they wanted to deal with him, no matter how powerful he was, he would be annihilated. And undoubtedly, the Tesseract was essential to the US government. If the fusion of the Hulk serum succeeded, Fang Ye's next step would be to not only recruit various mutants but also create his own team of super soldiers. That was why Fang Ye established several mercenary groups under his command. Chapter 22, The New Assistant. However, Fang Ye knew that creating a team of super soldiers was not as simple as he had imagined. Though the success rate of injecting the human enhancement potion was high, if the deadly flaws were not resolved, it would only create a group of lunatics bent on destruction. Fang Ye didn't want to engage in terror activities. What he needed were obedient subordinates. Bang, bang, bang. Come in. The knocking outside interrupted Fang Ye's thoughts. Fang Ye thought it might be Jennifer, but when he saw the person who entered, his expression couldn't help but freeze. The woman before him was undoubtedly beautiful, with a slender figure and wearing professional attire. She had an extraordinary temperament, combined with feminine charm and a touch of masculine charisma. However, instead of feeling happy about encountering such a beauty, Fang Ye felt a slight heaviness in his heart. Nevertheless, Fang Ye maintained a calm demeanor, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth as he casually asked, "What's your name? Why haven't I seen you before?" "Boss, my name is Natasha. I'm Jennifer's assistant. I just started working today, and she asked me to bring some agreements for you to sign." When Natasha heard Fang Ye asking for her name, she smiled and answered. Hearing the name Natasha, Fang Ye was certain of her identity, but he kept his expression unchanged and continued, "Natasha? It's a nice name. Leave the documents here, and you can go. I'll call you if there's anything." "Okay." After Natasha put down the documents, she left the room, closing the door behind her. After Natasha left, the smile on Fang Ye's face gradually disappeared, and a glint of coldness flashed in his eyes. Natasha Romanoff, also known as Black Widow, was one of S.H.I.E.L.D's top agents. Trained by former Soviet agents since childhood, she later betrayed the Soviet organization and joined SHIELD. Due to genetic enhancements, her aging process was significantly slowed down, and her immune system and combat capabilities were greatly improved. Combined with her years of training, she was a force to be reckoned with. In the original plot, Natasha was assigned to Stark Industries because Tony Stark had already invented the Iron Man armor, and SHIELD wanted to get their hands on it. However, Fang Ye had not expected that. Because of his appearance, Natasha was assigned to his side. "It seems that SHIELD is ready to take action against me." Fang Ye couldn't help but sigh. He hadn't expected to attract S.H.I.E.L.D's attention so quickly. What worried him even more was that he didn't know how many other forces were secretly preparing to make their move. However, Fang Ye was unaware that ever since he appeared in New York 2 years ago, he had drawn S.H.I.E.L.D's attention. His recent activities, acquiring the Hulk serum and the human enhancement potion, and reaching an agreement with William Stryker for secret live experiments on criminals, only intensified their focus on him. Naturally, Fang Ye couldn't keep all of this hidden from SHIELD. In fact, SHIELD was not the only force keeping tabs on him, there were many others. "It seems I need to speed up the plan." Fang Ye had anticipated this situation, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. Fang Ye was not afraid of spies or agents sneaking into UI Tower. He was more concerned about individuals like Natasha, who approached openly but didn't expose themselves to avoid alerting others. Actually, Natasha was also feeling perplexed at the moment. Fang Ye's behavior towards her was entirely different from the information she had obtained. Although he appeared courteous on the surface, Natasha felt a certain distance between them. "Could my cover be blown?" Natasha shook her head, denying her own thoughts. She and Fang Ye had never met before, and her identity was highly secretive. Even within S.H.I.E.L.D, not many people knew about her, so it was impossible for Fang Ye to know her background. Deep in thought, Natasha pressed a button on her gold wristwatch. Agent Phil Coulson, this is Natasha. Natasha, what's the situation? I've already met him, but he doesn't seem interested in me. Natasha, you have to have confidence in yourself. Perhaps he's just, using a tactic called Yukan Guzhong in their Chinese culture. Yukan Guzhong? Maybe. Though she had never doubted her looks and figure, Natasha couldn't understand why Fang Ye was not attracted to her. The only explanation might be what Agent Phil Coulson said. Perhaps Fang Ye was just using the tactic of Yukan Guzhong to deliberately draw her in. Natasha, continue to get closer to him. We must keep the Hulk serum and the human enhancement potion in our hands. If possible, try to bring Fang Ye into S.H.I.E.L.D. You know, our funding is a bit tight lately. I'll do my best. After ending the call, Natasha's cold and indifferent expression disappeared, and a charming smile reappeared at the corner of her mouth. Though Fang Ye's indifference surprised her, she knew that she had the looks to captivate anyone. Unfortunately, she was a rose with thorns. The Hulk serum and the human enhancement potion were of vital importance to S.H.I.E.L.D, and their methods were relatively gentle due to the forces behind Fang Ye. However, the main reason S.H.I.E.L.D wanted to recruit Fang Ye was that they couldn't ignore the astonishing speed at which he accumulated wealth. Building a financial empire in just 2 years, Fang Ye had earned the title of Financial King in the financial world. In the financial sector, Fang Ye's appeal was unquestionable. Not long after Natasha left, Deadpool suddenly appeared in the office. Fang Ye was used to Deadpool's sudden appearances and disappearances, but precisely because of this, Fang Ye was more eager for the spatial movement device. Wade, how about we make a deal? Without waiting for Deadpool to speak, Fang Ye smiled and proposed. What kind of deal? The word deal had an unparalleled appeal to Deadpool. For him, a deal meant money, and money was undoubtedly his favorite. How about selling your belt to me? How much? Deadpool hesitated, knowing that his belt was of great importance to him. Still, he couldn't resist asking about the price. Seeing Deadpool tempted, Fang Ye couldn't help but be excited and casually waved his hand, saying, "Name your price. $100 billion, and I'll sell you the belt." The belt was indeed essential to Deadpool, but in his mind, everything in the world had a price, and the price of his belt was $100 billion. The smile on Fang Ye's face froze, and the corner of his mouth twitched. $100 billion for a worn-out belt? If he invested $100 billion in the research lab, he believed that Dr. William Stryker would undoubtedly be able to develop the spatial movement device. Of course, to replicate the spatial movement device, they needed the core metal material for the matrix operation. What do you want with me? Do you have any results from the interrogation? Boss, we are here to discuss the deal. Let's talk about the deal later. I'm more interested in the results of the interrogation. If you can't handle it, your bonus will be deducted. Fang Ye ruthlessly interrupted Deadpool, giving him a warning about the bonus deduction. Although Deadpool slandered in his heart, he was genuinely afraid of Fang Ye deducting his bonus. So, for now, he didn't mention the deal and told Fang Ye that they had results from the interrogation. There are 18 suspicious individuals. One of them escaped, but among the remaining 17, 6 are spies from other forces, and 2 of them are mutants. As Deadpool reported, Fang Ye's brows furrowed. Business spies were one thing, but mutants were a whole different level of concern. Moreover, one of the escaped individuals had the ability to teleport using space. Tell the 2 mutants to come here. I have some questions for them. All right. Deadpool replied and then disappeared from the room. Chapter 23, The Shapeshifting Woman. The abilities of the 2 mutants were invisibility and shapeshifting. Their real strength was not very strong, but with Deadpool by his side to protect him, Fang Ye wasn't worried about any accidents. Regarding Deadpool's strength, Fang Ye was certain. Otherwise, he wouldn't spend $1 billion each year to hire Deadpool as his bodyguard. Fang Ye was an investor, and he always measured whether the expenditure was worth it. Boss, the people are here. A moment later, Deadpool appeared in the office with the 2 individuals. Fang Ye slowly turned around, gazing at the 2 before him with a calm and unchanging expression. His fingers rhythmically tapped on the desk, making a crisp sound that added a tense atmosphere to the silent office. An invisible pressure filled the room, oppressing the 2 individuals before him. After a while, Fang Ye finally spoke. His tone was deep and powerful, gentle yet imposing, as he pointed to the sofa in front of him. Please, have a seat. Thank you. Both individuals were not ordinary people, but they remained unaffected by the pressure Fang Ye was exuding. Seeing this, Fang Ye smiled slightly, not feeling angry but rather becoming more interested in the 2. Would you 2 like to introduce yourselves? Mr. Fang, I've heard of your name before. I'm Joshua League. Hello, Mr. Fang, my name is Raven Darkholm. With their lives in Fang Ye's hands, the two individuals dared not act too presumptuously and truthfully disclosed their names. Fang Ye's expression remained unchanged, but his heart couldn't help but feel a slight heaviness. Fang Ye had not heard of the name Joshua League before, but Raven Darkholm, also known as Mystique, was famous far and wide. Now, Fang Ye not only confirmed the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D, but also that Magneto's Brotherhood was also eyeing him. This made Fang Ye feel immense pressure. Undoubtedly, Joshua League was also affiliated with another force, and with the one individual who escaped using spatial teleportation, it could be determined that there were at least 4 forces secretly watching him and ready to strike. How could Fang Ye not feel the pressure? Mystique, one of Magneto's trusted followers. I've heard of you. Fang Ye smiled calmly and then turned to Joshua League to inquire, which faction do you belong to? Mr. Fang, I don't belong to any faction. I infiltrated UEI Tower because of a serum. Someone offered a high price to purchase it, so I became interested. Joshua League's expression was embarrassed as he spoke. His words were difficult to distinguish between truth and lies, as they might be a mix of both. Fang Ye wouldn't easily believe him. Fang Ye smiled silently, took out a cigarette for himself, and a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. Mr. League, I'll give you one more chance. Mr. Fang, I really didn't lie. Fang Ye didn't look at him again, just lightly waved his hand. Deadpool, with a fierce grin, no one saw how he unsheathed his sword, but a silver flash later, Joshua League didn't even have time to scream before his head was separated from his body. His body twitched a few times on the ground before becoming completely still. Fang Ye had given him a chance, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to cherish it. Fang Ye didn't need to know which faction Joshua League belonged to. He only needed to know that Joshua League represented one of the forces. After all, there were countless forces plotting against him, and he only needed to be aware of the main few. The forces that truly caught Fang Ye's attention were undoubtedly the formidable ones like S.H.I.E.L.D, the Brotherhood, Hydra, and others. As for those small forces, Fang Ye didn't even put them in his eyes. The shape-shifting woman looked at Fang Ye with a mix of admiration and solemnity in her eyes. She could tell that Fang Ye was a decisive person, similar in character to Magneto. They were both individuals who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals, but the shape-shifting woman admired such people because, in her opinion, to achieve great things, one must possess this kind of decisiveness. Mr. Fang, I think you and Eric should become friends. Is that so? I would be honored to be friends with Magneto. Fang Ye pondered for a moment and then looked at the shape-shifting woman with a smile. I want Magneto's contact information. I have a business proposal to discuss with him, and I believe Magneto will be very interested. Of course. I said you two would become friends. The shape-shifting woman had returned to her original appearance by now, with her entire body covered in blue scales, looking vastly different from a regular human. She had the ability to change her own cells and tissue structure, allowing her to transform into anyone, including irises, fingerprints, skin texture, voice, and even gender. Her attire could also mimic the texture of any clothing. It could be said that the shape-shifting woman was a natural infiltrator. This is Eric's contact information. The shape-shifting woman readily provided the contact information, and Fang Ye nodded in appreciation, indicating that she could leave at any time. As the shape-shifting woman was about to leave, she said something to Fang Ye. Mr. Fang, when I infiltrated UEI Tower last night, I inadvertently encountered someone. He is a member of Xavier's school. I believe Mr. Wilson has already met him. Oh, you mean the guy who can teleport through space? Deadpool couldn't forget about the individual who escaped. To him, losing the money that was almost in his hands was unacceptable. That's right. Nightcrawler is one of Professor Charles's trusted followers. The shape-shifting woman spoke with certainty, leaving no room for doubt. Because the shape-shifting woman was friends with Professor X and Magneto, she referred to them directly by their names. Fang Ye smiled and didn't say anything. There was a saying in China that an enemy's enemy is a friend, and undoubtedly, the shape-shifting woman was trying to sow discord. Perhaps what she said was true. Fang Ye doubted whether Nightcrawler, if he posed a threat to Magneto's cause, would be mercilessly dealt with by Mystique. Thank you for letting me know. Give my regards to Magneto. The shape-shifting woman nodded with a smile, knowing that Fang Ye was giving her the signal to leave. After the shape-shifting woman and Deadpool left, Fang Ye's face quickly darkened. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. Now, the Brotherhood, Xavier's school, S.H.I.E.L.D, one after another formidable forces, had their eyes on him. No matter what their intentions were, they undoubtedly had a keen interest in the Hulk serum and the human enhancement potion. Both of these items were things any faction would desire. Fang Ye would never hand over the Hulk serum because it was his hope of returning to the real world. Moreover, there were also other forces lurking in the shadows, such as Hydra and the one behind Joshua League. All of this made Fang Ye feel an invisible pressure. Among so many forces, could he really keep the Hulk serum and the human enhancement potion? It seems I have no other choice but to advance my plans. I just hope I can delay them for a while. Fang Ye sighed inwardly. He had already anticipated this situation and had thought of a countermeasure in advance. Immediately, Fang Ye took out his phone and made a call. Chapter 24, Success or Martyrdom. After contemplating for a moment, Fang Ye took out his phone and made a call. Among the various forces, S.H.I.E.L.D. was not the strongest in terms of power, but due to its official background, its threat was undoubtedly the greatest. Therefore, the first force that Fang Ye needed to restrain was S.H.I.E.L.D. After the call was connected, the other party did not answer. Fang Ye remained composed and calmly sat on the sofa, waiting for the call to be returned. As expected, after about 5 minutes, Fang Ye's phone rang. Mr. Dennis, I hope I didn't disturb you just now. Mr. Fang, as you know, I am not always available to answer calls. Hehe, I understand. Mr. Fang, it's always a pleasant surprise to receive your calls. I hope this time is no exception. Of course. Mr. Dennis, when have I ever disappointed you? UEI Fund had thousands of members, but 90% of them were regular members. There were less than 100 silver members, and the most prestigious gold members consisted of only 3 rare individuals. To become a gold member, one not only needed to be worth billions, where money was no longer the main concern, but also required a distinguished status and position. Mr. Dennis, whose full name was Dennis, was a member of the U.S. Council, and it was because of his position that he qualified to be one of the 3 gold members of UEI Fund. Mr. Dennis, I have some great news to tell you. Mr. Fang, I'm all ears. Mr. Dennis, this is something you have been looking forward to for a long time. UEI Fund is going public. Thank God. Mr. Fang, you've finally come to your senses? I've been advising you to go public for a long time, but you never listened. Well, it's not too late now. The listing of UEI Fund was not only highly anticipated by shareholders but also a topic of great interest among the wealthy. The current valuation of UEI Fund had already exceeded $1 trillion, and once it went public, its value would instantly multiply several times. At that time, even though it might not be on par with companies like Osborne Industries and Stark Industries, it would be not far behind. Hearing the pleasantly surprised tone of Dennis, Fang Ye couldn't help but smile calmly. Mr. Dennis, the good news I have for you is that I have prepared a small gift for you, 10% of UEI Fund's shares. I hope you will like it. Hiss. A gasp could be heard from the other end of the phone. Dennis was stunned by Fang Ye's grand gesture. Because once UEI Fund went public, that 10% of shares would be worth hundreds of billions of US dollars. Fang Ye had generously gifted it to him, but Dennis also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch. Dennis had become a council member thanks to the crucial role his family's influence played, but he himself was also a man of extraordinary means. After a moment of silence, Dennis spoke with reluctance in his voice. Mr. Fang, thank you for the gift of 10% of the shares. I'm very tempted, but as you would say in your Chinese culture, there's no gain without work. No, Mr. Dennis, it's something you deserve. However, recently SHIELD seems to be less friendly toward me, and I don't want Hydra to get involved either. I hope Mr. Dennis can help mediate this conflict so I can go public peacefully, don't you think? I will handle this matter, Mr. Fang. I will give you a satisfactory answer. Mr. Dennis, then I'll be waiting for good news. Seeing Dennis agree, Fang Ye couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, the situation was within Fang Ye's expectations. No one could refuse the lure of hundreds of billions in wealth. There's a saying that money can move mountains, and this was used to describe the magical power and allure of money. Moreover, this was the United States, a society that revered money above all else. The power of money in this society sometimes exceeded imagination. After ending the call with Dennis, Fang Ye dialed another number. Relying solely on Dennis might not be enough to restrain SHIELD, because although Dennis was a council member, he was not the only one who had a say in the entire council. Moreover, SHIELD and Hydra were currently indistinguishable from each other, and Hydra had infiltrated too deep. Hidden in the shadows, Hydra was even more terrifying than SHIELD, and Fang Ye needed to deal with this hidden threat. Mr. Pierce, it's Fang Ye. After the call connected, Fang Ye introduced himself. Regarding the Hydra organization, Fang Ye had no intention of using a gentle approach. Hydra was insatiable, and 10% of the shares might not satisfy them. Fang Ye. The name Fang Ye was no longer as obscure as it was 2 years ago. Now, who in the world had not heard of the title Financial King? However, Alexander Pierce was puzzled. He and Fang Ye were not acquainted at all, and there was no relationship between them. Why would Fang Ye call him Alexander Pierce, one of the senior agents of Hydra, former director of SHIELD, a comrade of the current director Nick Fury and the acting director Phil Coulson. He also had another identity, the head spy of Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. I have a list here that I believe Mr. Pierce will be interested in. What list? Alexander Pierce's heart tightened inexplicably, and he had a vague feeling of foreboding. After reading the information on the list sent by Fang Ye, Alexander Pierce's expression changed slightly. The list contained more than 10 names, all of them important members of Hydra hidden within S.H.I.E.L.D. Alexander Pierce forced a smile, his voice slightly gloomy. Mr. Fang, you seem to be quite familiar with S.H.I.E.L.D. Why are you sending me a list of our members? What do you want with this list on your hands? Mr. Pierce, I have no ill intentions towards Hydra. If possible, I believe we can cooperate. However, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been causing me trouble lately, and I don't want Hydra to get involved either. I hope Mr. Pierce can do me a favor and help resolve this trouble. I believe you wouldn't want this list to end up on Nick Fury's desk. The list only had about 10 names, but without exception, all of them were important members of Hydra. Fang Ye didn't necessarily have to resort to threats. He could choose to join Hydra, as he believed that Hydra would definitely welcome him and would be willing to help him out of his current predicament. But if he joined Hydra, it would be difficult for Fang Ye to escape if he changed his mind later. Hydra was not a loose organization, they had extraordinary means to control their members. It wasn't as simple as joining or leaving at will. If it were that easy, Hydra would have been eliminated long ago. The key was that even if he joined Hydra, Fang Ye couldn't guarantee that Hydra wouldn't have its eyes on the Hulk serum. Otherwise, he might consider joining Hydra. Strike at the vital point, since he had chosen to threaten, he had to strike where it mattered. Alexander Pierce fell into silence. He didn't know how much of Hydra's secrets Fang Ye held in his hands, making him hesitant to act rashly. After taking a deep breath, Alexander Pierce made up his mind. I'll agree to your request, but I can only guarantee 3 months during which S.H.I.E.L.D. won't trouble you. Also, I want to extend a formal invitation to Mr. Fang to join Hydra. I hope you will consider it. Then, I'll trouble Mr. Pierce. As for joining Hydra, I will seriously consider it. After hanging up the phone, Fang Ye sighed inwardly. Hydra was a huge, global terrorist organization whose goal was to seize world domination. They boasted about themselves by likening their existence to the mythical creature Hydra from Greek mythology. Cut off one head, and 2 more would grow in its place, never to be annihilated. The history of Hydra could be traced back to ancient Egypt. If it weren't necessary, Fang Ye really didn't want to provoke them. But at present, it was the only means Fang Ye had to restrain Hydra temporarily. However, he was well prepared for the fierce counterattack from Hydra. This time, it was either success or martyrdom. If the fusion of the Hulk serum succeeded, all troubles would be solved. But if it failed, there would be no place for Fang Ye to bury his body. However, if the fusion failed, Fang Ye estimated that his chances of survival were slim. In that case, he might as well go all out. He had temporarily restrained S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra lurking in the shadows, but Fang Ye still needed to deal with the threats posed by the X-Mansion and the Brotherhood. Chapter 25, Stabilizing the Situation. Fang Ye temporarily stabilized S.H.I.E.L.D. and the hidden Hydra, but he still needed to deal with the X-Mansion and the Brotherhood, the 2 mutant forces. Flicking the cigarette ash, he extinguished the cigarette. Rubbing his temples, he poured a glass of red wine and drank it all in one go. His gaze fell on the thin golden business card on the glass table. The card was left by Mystique, with contact information for Magneto. To deal with mutant forces, Magneto was the breakthrough point. Fang Ye dialed the number on the business card. He needed to have a good talk with Magneto. In fact, there was not much conflict of interest between him and Magneto. After all, the Hulk serum had little use for Magneto. Or rather, human-enhancing drugs and the Hulk serum were of little use to mutants. Mutant abilities were derived from the X gene, and injecting other drugs or serums would most likely cause their X gene to collapse. Compared to ordinary people, mutants had an extremely low success rate when fusing with other serums. As for the success rate of fusing with the Hulk serum, it was already so low that it was unacceptable. Whether it would succeed or not mainly depended on luck. Fang Ye believed that even if Magneto got hold of the Hulk serum, he wouldn't choose to fuse with it. If it weren't for needing strength as a guarantee to return to the real world, Fang Ye wouldn't want to gamble with his life. Mr. Magneto, this is Fang Ye. Mr. Fang Ye, I'm glad to speak with you. Mystique has told me about the situation. Now, I'm curious, what kind of deal are you proposing? I told you, Mr. Magneto, you will definitely be interested. Oh, please tell me. Fang Ye's tone was extremely confident, which immediately piqued Magneto's interest. He believed that Fang Ye wouldn't make empty promises. Since he was confident, he must have some assurance. Magneto couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Seeing Magneto becoming interested, Fang Ye couldn't help but smile calmly. Magneto, As far as I know, the Brotherhood's current situation isn't very good, right? Are you calling just to mock me? Of course not. I want to form an alliance with your side. My sincerity is 10% of UEI Fund's shares. I believe you must be in great need of this wealth at the moment. As an ally, you need to help me deal with a little trouble. 10% of the shares do tempt me, and I do indeed need this money at the moment. Tell me about your trouble. I believe the Brotherhood can solve it for you. Magneto's answer was quite straightforward. Because the Brotherhood and the X-Mansion were originally incompatible, so for Fang Ye to offer him 10% of the shares for free, how could Magneto refuse? Moreover, as Fang Ye had said, the members of the Brotherhood were numerous, but because mutants were excluded, they didn't have a normal economic source. Though their lives weren't impoverished, they were by no means thriving. The 10% share of UEI Fund would be worth hundreds of billions of US dollars once it went public, and it would continue to appreciate in the future. Even Magneto couldn't remain indifferent to such a vast sum of money. With several $100 billion, the Brotherhood's situation would immediately improve. Suddenly, Magneto's heart stirred. He had established the Brotherhood to lead them in opposing humans, and he had always wanted to change the mutants' situation. If he had the financial support from Fang Ye. Thinking about this, Magneto's attitude towards Fang Ye became even more enthusiastic. The two of them chatted happily, talking for a good half an hour. Magneto, then, I wish us a pleasant cooperation. Cooperation, indeed. Mr. Fang Ye. After hanging up the phone, Fang Ye breathed a sigh of relief, his expression returning to calm and composure. UEI Fund was a huge piece of cake that everyone wanted a slice of. To firmly control this cake, Fang Ye had kept UEI Fund from going public for 2 years. He wanted to divide the cake at the critical moment and either entice or suppress other forces. The first object he tried to win over was Congressman Ermund Dennis. To be precise, Fang Ye was trying to win over the Dennis family. The Dennis family was powerful, deeply rooted in New York, and in terms of strength, they were undoubtedly among the top 10 families in the United States. Now, Fang Ye had given a piece of the cake to Magneto. The enormous wealth of hundreds of billions of US dollars was enough to tempt even Magneto. The result did not surprise Fang Ye because he knew Magneto indeed needed this wealth. As Fang Ye learned, the Brotherhood was not in a good situation. This wealth would provide them with much-needed relief. That was why Fang Ye chose Magneto over Professor X, because Magneto needed this wealth more. UEI Fund was a cake that Fang Ye had prepared for the future. But Fang Ye didn't expect that even before the Cosmic Cube appeared, just the Hulk serum alone had attracted so many forces' attention. Because of this, Fang Ye had to divide the cake and temporarily stabilize the situation. However, dealing with the Dennis family was, at most, a trade. Taking the money and resolving the trouble for Fang Ye, they could abandon him at any time. After all, without that 10% share, they could still live well. Being one of the top 10 families in the United States, the 10% share was just icing on the cake for them. But both Fang Ye and Magneto had obtained what they needed from each other, leading to a win-win situation and a stronger relationship. At least Fang Ye didn't have to worry about being abandoned by Magneto before he became useful. Though the words may not sound pleasant, that was the reality. When using others, Fang Ye also prepared for being used. Paying 20% of the shares was indeed a high price, but it temporarily resolved the threat posed by the 4 major forces, and Fang Ye believed it was worth it. Once Fang Ye successfully fused with the Hulk serum, he would slowly settle scores with those forces, and what was his would never be taken away by others. Perhaps there were still some other forces watching, but as long as these 4 major forces didn't make trouble, Fang Ye would have some breathing space. This period might only be 2 or 3 months, during which time the human-enhancing drug and the Hulk serum had to be perfected. This was Fang Ye's last chance. As for those small forces, Fang Ye didn't pay them much attention. If any of those small forces dared to be disrespectful, Fang Ye wouldn't mind setting an example to warn the others. However, there were numerous hidden forces in the Marvel world, and there were still many forces worth his attention. For example, the Hellfire Club was not to be underestimated. Actually, a year ago, the Hellfire Club had also extended an invitation to Fang Ye, but he had chosen to decline at the time. The Hellfire Club was an international organization where global elites gathered. It was established in the 18th century in England, and until today, the club had become the highest honor for successful businessmen and aristocrats in high society. Behind the Hellfire Club was a mysterious faction known as the Core Group, manipulating things from behind the scenes. That was the reason why Fang Ye had declined their invitation at that time. Everything that should be done has been done. Now, I can only wait for the results. Chapter 26, Human Enhancing Drug. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, nearly 2 months had passed. During this period, everything had been calm, and there were no more incidents of mutants infiltrating UEI Tower. As for ordinary commercial spies, they were no match for the intelligent program J.A.R.V.I.SS subroutines, which handled any infiltration attempts swiftly. At present, there were no spies daring enough to sneak into UI Tower. In addition to the Dennis family countering Hydra in secret, S.H.I.E.L.D had not caused any trouble for Fang Ye again. Black Widow Natasha had resigned, possibly receiving orders to do so as early as 2 months ago. Another noteworthy development was that UI Fund had already gone public and issued shares a month ago. In just 2 months, the market value of UI Fund had multiplied several times over. In terms of financial strength, UI Fund was now on par with large corporations like Osborne Industries and Stark Industries. If there was any difference, it was only in terms of background and connections. However, such connections and background required time to accumulate and couldn't be achieved overnight. In the past 2 months, there were several interesting incidents in New York, and one of them caught Fang Ye's attention: the appearance of a new superhero. This superhero fought crime all around the city, and thanks to his presence, the crime rate in New York had decreased significantly. This superhero dressed in blue and red tight-fitting clothes with a spider pattern on his outfit. He also used spider silk skillfully. The citizens of New York now called him Spider-Man. Fang Ye had already anticipated Spider-Man's appearance, as he had encountered Peter Parker back in Osborne Industries. Fang Ye knew that Parker would be bitten by a super spider, undergo a genetic mutation, and gain the abilities of a spider. However, Fang Ye had no intention of recruiting Spider-Man. The young man's sense of justice was too strong, making him unsuitable to work under Fang Ye. As for the Hulk, perhaps because of Fang Ye's influence, a butterfly effect occurred. General Ross and Dr. Banner's relationship did not improve as in the original story, and due to multiple battles, their relationship had become increasingly strained. However, as long as the Hulk didn't rampage through Wall Street, Fang Ye had no intention of getting involved. He already had enough troubles to deal with. In an underground research center room, the conference room was full of people, with Fang Ye sitting at the head, his gaze sweeping across everyone. Dr. Stern, you can start first. Yes. Dr. Stern stood up, adjusting his tie, and gave a slight cough. He began reporting on the progress of the Hulk serum's research in the past 2 months. Boss, after 2 months of research, we have made significant breakthroughs with the Hulk serum. The success rate of fusion has increased by 4 percentage points. With more time, I am confident that we can further improve the serum. Fang Ye nodded with a smile, affirming Dr. Stern's efforts. When the Hulk serum was just developed, the fusion success rate was 1% to 3%. Now, the success rate had increased by 4 percentage points, reaching 5% to 8%. Although it was still very low, it was a significant improvement compared to the initial stage. Fang Ye was relieved. He was glad that he had tied Dr. Stern to Wall Street, otherwise, the Hulk serum's progress would have been much slower. The development of the Hulk serum had almost reached Fang Ye's expected goal. Now, it was time to focus on the human-enhancing drug. After praising Dr. Stern for a while, Fang Ye turned his gaze to Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors stood up and began his report. Boss, we have also made significant progress with the human-enhancing drug in the past 2 months. We have overcome the fatal flaw of personality fragmentation. However, the drug still has its shortcomings. After injection, it may have some impact on one's psyche. Impact on the psyche? Can you elaborate? Hearing that the human-enhancing drug still had flaws, Fang Ye frowned. It was not the answer he wanted to hear. Seeing Fang Ye's frown, Dr. Connors felt a bit uneasy. For example, after injection, one's emotions may become volatile and prone to anger. If not properly controlled, it may even distort a person's character. Can this flaw be overcome in a short time? If you give me half a year, I am confident that I can completely perfect the human-enhancing drug. Half a year, huh? Fang Ye sighed inwardly. He didn't have half a year to spare. He had paid a great price to gain 3 months. He had even risked offending Hydra for that time. Half a year was almost an unrealistic dream. I can only take a risk. Fang Ye had made up his mind. He was going to inject the human-enhancing drug. Now that the fatal flaw of personality fragmentation had been resolved, Fang Ye didn't have too many concerns. As for the emotional impact, Fang Ye was confident in controlling his emotions because his mind was different from ordinary people's. He could maintain absolute calmness whenever he wished. Fang Ye had been guessing that perhaps the reason for his unique mental state was his precognitive ability. So far, Fang Ye was not completely clear about his precognitive ability. The only thing he could be sure of was that it granted him 2 abilities. The first ability was the perception of danger. He could sense any impending danger that was about to happen to him. The second ability was the control of his emotions. Even when he was in a state of fury, he could maintain a clear consciousness. It was a strange state, akin to being half crazy and half calm. However, compared to the first ability, Fang Ye rarely used the second one. It could even be said that it was practically useless. But now, this ability that had been of little use in the past might be the solution to a current problem. After a moment of contemplation, Fang Ye raised his head, looking at Dr. Williams. He had great expectations for the research progress on the spatial teleportation device. However, the rental period for the waist belt had already expired, and Fang Ye had to continue renting it. Deadpool didn't mind at all. He was more than happy for Fang Ye to keep renting it for $5 million a day. Dr. Williams, how is the research progress on the spatial teleportation device? Boss, I have already grasped the operating principles of the energy circulation system matrix. As long as I find a suitable metal material as the core of the matrix, I am confident that I can manufacture the spatial teleportation device. Good. Fang Ye smiled. Dr. Williams did not disappoint him. However, Fang Ye had not yet found a metal material suitable for the matrix operation. He had sent people to investigate Heinrich Zima's place, but as of now, Heinrich Zima did not possess the type of metal material suitable for the spatial teleportation device. It was possible that he hadn't obtained it yet since the events of the Avengers were still quite some time away. Thus, Fang Ye continued to keep an eye on Heinrich Zima while also searching for other suitable metal materials. Everyone, go back to what you were working on. Dr. Connors, you stay. Yes. After everyone else left, only Fang Ye and Dr. Connors remained in the conference room. Dr. Connors hesitated to speak. He knew exactly why Fang Ye had kept him. However, he genuinely did not want Fang Ye to take any risks. Fang Ye was not only his boss but also his main financial backer. He absolutely did not want anything to happen to him. Dr. Connors, you should know the reason why I kept you here. Boss, won't you reconsider? You only need to wait for another half a year, and I guarantee that I will thoroughly perfect the human-enhancing drug within that time. My decision is final. There's no need to persuade me further. Ah, boss, then let's go to the lab. Fang Ye stood up, adjusting his clothes. He was nervous, there was no denying that fact. Although the success rate of the human-enhancing drug fusion was very high, there was still a possibility of failure, and the consequence would be genetic breakdown. Fang Ye took a deep breath, controlling his nervous emotions. In an instant, he regained absolute calmness and rationality. He nodded to Dr. Connors. Let's go. Chapter 27, Injection and Enhancement. The underground research facility was like a maze with various passages. Approximately every 10 steps, there were surveillance cameras installed, making the defense of the laboratory stricter than even the White House in the United States. Boss, we have reached the laboratory. Go in. Although Fang Ye didn't personally design the layout of the underground research facility, there was probably no one else who understood it better than him. As Fang Ye and Dr. Connors entered the laboratory, they found that the scientists inside were working in an orderly manner. In the spacious laboratory, dozens of scientists were gathered together, discussing something in low voices. Even with Fang Ye and Dr. Connors' arrival, they didn't seem to notice. Don't disturb them. I want to see what they are researching. Fang Ye gestured for Dr. Connors not to call out to the scientists. As they walked inside, Fang Ye discovered that these scientists were conducting live experiments. On an experimental chair lay a criminal, restrained in all four limbs, and even their head was fixed. Surrounding the chair were numerous transparent syringes, filled with green liquid that was continuously being injected into the criminal's body. As the liquid entered the criminal's body, a look of pain gradually appeared on their face. Ah! Piercing screams came from the criminal's mouth. The criminal struggled wildly, and their strength kept increasing. The experimental chair shook, and even the bandages that were securing their arms seemed to loosen. What interested Fang Ye the most was the fact that the criminal's naked body started to visibly swell with muscles. Their originally thin body transformed into a muscular build in the blink of an eye. However, the criminal's eyes turned blood red, filled with rage and madness. Clearly, the experiment to strengthen the human body had failed. The subject is reaching its limit. Dispose of it. Wait, give it a little more time. The scientists continued their discussion while carefully collecting data on the changes in the subject's body after the injection. As the subject approached its limit, a scientist pressed a button, and dozens of lasers shot out, silencing the criminal's screams. The criminal's body gradually disintegrated into hundreds of pieces. Perhaps due to the high temperature of the lasers, there was no scene of blood splattering. Even from a distance of 7 or 8 meters, Fang Ye could smell the scent of cooked meat. The scientists were skillful at their work, picking up the pieces and putting them into plastic bags before throwing them into the nearby trash bin. If an ordinary person witnessed such a scene, they would probably have vomited profusely. However, Fang Ye was in an absolutely calm state. The bloody scene did not affect him. All right, you can all stop. The boss has been standing here for quite a while, didn't any of you notice? Dr. Connors finally spoke up. Boss. Dr. Connors. Finally, the group of scientists noticed Fang Ye and Dr. Connors standing quietly not far away. Fang Ye nodded at them and then looked at Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors understood and coughed lightly, drawing everyone's attention. Stop the experiments, all of you can leave first. Yes. After the scientists left, Dr. Connors led Fang Ye to a secret laboratory. The laboratory was equipped with various top-notch instruments, some of which were medical devices. Boss, are you really sure about injecting yourself with the human-enhancing drug? Dr. Connors still wanted to persuade Fang Ye. After all, the chance of failure in fusing the human-enhancing drug was still quite high. Didn't the experiment with the criminal just now fail? Let's begin. Taking a deep breath, Fang Ye instructed Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors sighed inwardly but knew that Fang Ye's mind was made up. No matter how much he tried to persuade him, it would be futile. Now, Dr. Connors could only hope that nothing unexpected would happen during the injection. Boss, lie down first. All right. Fang Ye nodded, took off his clothes, and lay bare-chested on the experimental chair. Fang Ye had a decent figure, but due to his affluent lifestyle, he was slightly plump. After Fang Ye lay down, Dr. Connors pressed a button, and the experimental chair's clamps were activated, locking Fang Ye's limbs and even his head in place. Dr. Connors opened the refrigerated cabinet and took out 9 vials of the human-enhancing drug. The human-enhancing drug had been modified. It was no longer in the misty form as in the original story but had turned into green liquid. Boss, I'm going to start now. Go ahead. Fang Ye closed his eyes and felt a sense of tranquility. Following Fang Ye's orders, Dr. Connors took a deep breath and pressed the start button beside him. The 9 vials of the human-enhancing drug flowed into Fang Ye's body through the syringes. Dr. Connors kept a close eye on Fang Ye, his expression tense. He was afraid that something unexpected might happen. If anything went wrong with Fang Ye, not only would his research on regeneration be ruined, but the other scientists wouldn't let him off either. Finding another boss like Fang Ye, who fully supported their research, wasn't easy, and not everyone had the financial resources like Fang Ye. Eventually, Fang Ye let out a cry of pain. His face twisted, his eyes turned bloodshot, and his whole body trembled slightly, enduring unimaginable pain. The pain in his body was bearable. The key issue was the inexplicable anger rising from the depths of his heart. If it weren't for Fang Ye's ability to control his emotions, he would have gone crazy by now. Boss, you must hold on. Gradually, Fang Ye's body started to change. His muscles visibly expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the most astonishing change was his height, which increased from 1.75 meters to 1.80 meters. He even developed 8-pack abs on his chest, making his physique perfect. Compared to those famous fitness trainers, Fang Ye was on a completely different level. As time passed, the burning pain and itching gradually subsided, and Fang Ye felt that his body was now filled with strength. Congratulations, boss. The fusion was successful. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Dr. Connors was quite frightened just now, but fortunately, nothing unexpected happened to Fang Ye. After Dr. Connors pressed the button to release the steel clamps that were holding Fang Ye's limbs, Fang Ye got off the experimental chair and stretched lazily, hearing his bones crack. Phew, is this what having power feels like? Exhaling lightly, Fang Ye felt better than he had ever felt before. Dr. Connors, prepare a set of clothes for me. Previously, Fang Ye's height was 1.75 meters, but now he suddenly grew to 1.80 meters, so naturally, his old clothes wouldn't fit anymore. Boss, please wait for a moment. Dr. Connors nodded and made a phone call. Chapter 28, Spider-Man. Bang, bang, bang. In the training room, the sound of heavy punches hitting the sandbag had been going on for a while. Sweating profusely, Fang Ye was training vigorously. Around him, there were already 7 sandbags that had been rendered useless. 3 days had passed since the injection of the drug. At this point, Fang Ye had basically mastered the sudden increase in strength. The human enhancement drug had improved every aspect of his body, surpassing the limits of human endurance, speed, reflexes, strength, and more. In terms of physical attributes alone, Fang Ye was on par with Captain America, Steve Rogers, who had been injected with the super soldier serum. However, if they were to actually fight, there was no doubt that Fang Ye would be defeated. He had never learned any combat skills, and if he were to fight against Captain America, he would only end up getting beaten. Moreover, the human enhancement drug not only improved his body but also expanded his mental capacity. Fang Ye now possessed an auxiliary ability, photographic memory. Photographic memory did not directly increase his combat power, but Fang Ye attached great importance to it. With the ability to memorize things instantly, his learning ability had increased several-fold. What used to take him 5 hours to learn, he could now comprehend within an hour. Having learned it and truly understanding it were two different things. The difference between the two was huge. Boom, boom, boom. Come in. As he heard a knock on the door, Fang Ye stopped his movements and walked to the nearby sofa, wiping the sweat off his face with a towel. In walked Jennifer, holding a file in her hand. She approached and gently placed the documents on the table, pushing them in front of Fang Ye. "Boss, here's a document that requires your personal signature. Also, we just received news that the Explore Aerospace Group seems to have intentions of acquiring Osborne Industries. The board of directors of Osborne Industries will convene a meeting this afternoon at 6 o'clock, and all shareholders will attend. Would you like to go in the afternoon?" "A board meeting? It seems I'll have to attend in the afternoon." Upon hearing that the Explore Aerospace Group was planning to acquire Osborne Industries, Fang Ye knew that those capitalists were going to make a move against Norman Osborn. If it were any other company claiming to acquire Osborne Industries, Fang Ye would only treat it as a joke. But the Explore Aerospace Group was different. It was a true giant, with a market value of $15 trillion, one of the most powerful conglomerates in the United States. What was even scarier was that the Explore Aerospace Group was backed by a massive consortium. Although the Explore Aerospace Group's name might not be as well known as Osborne Industries or Stark Industries, in terms of financial power, both Osborne and Stark combined wouldn't be a match for the Explore Aerospace Group. Furthermore, Fang Ye had been waiting for this day for a long time, the day when the board of directors rebelled. It was the only chance to acquire Osborne Industries. Because even if the Explore Aerospace Group wanted to acquire Osborne Industries, Fang Ye also wanted to acquire it. However, he had never had the opportunity before, but now the opportunity had come. "All right, you can go now. Come and get me at 5 o'clock in the afternoon." "Yes." Jennifer left, and Fang Ye continued his training. Even though Fang Ye had trained for a whole noon, he still didn't feel the slightest bit tired. The human enhancement drug gave him an endurance that surpassed all limits, as well as a terrifying recovery rate. Fang Ye's longest recorded training session lasted for 17 hours before he felt a little tired. This showed just how terrifying his endurance had become. After a few days of training, Fang Ye had completely mastered his sudden increase in strength. Although he still couldn't fully control it as he wished, it didn't affect his normal life. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Fang Ye finished his lunch. Then, he took Deadpool and left the UI Tower, heading to Osborne Industries. Fang Ye's current vehicle was a limited edition silver Osleus, worth over $10 million. Whether in the Marvel Universe or the real world, Fang Ye had always been fond of Osleus cars. Half of the sports cars in his garage were limited edition Osleus models. As the car passed by a bank, sudden gunfire could be heard. Fang Ye, who had closed his eyes to rest, was suddenly awakened. He looked out of the window and saw chaos in the streets, with crowds of people running in all directions. At the entrance of a bank on the right, a group of people was screaming as they rushed out. "What's going on?" "Boss, it seems we've stumbled upon a robbery. Someone is robbing the bank." Deadpool's face was filled with excitement as he kept his eyes fixed on the bank's entrance. Fang Ye's body had been strengthened, and his senses had greatly improved. He suddenly felt something and looked towards a building on the right. He saw a figure descending from the sky, shooting several strands of spider silk. 3 of the robbers were instantly bound by the spider webs. The person wore a blue and red skin-tight suit with a spider symbol on it, none other than the recently appeared superhero in New York, Spider-Man. "It's Spider-Man? We're saved. Awesome! Spider-Man is amazing. I love you, Spider-Man." Seeing Spider-Man's arrival, many people were excited. Although Spider-Man had only appeared recently, many people already liked him and considered him a hero. Fang Ye smiled lightly. It seemed that the young guy was quite popular. The 5 robbers were just ordinary people and were no match for Spider-Man. They were quickly restrained by his spider silk and left hanging in the air. After dealing with the robbers, Spider-Man shot out another strand of web and swung away like a swing. "Let's go." With Spider-Man gone, there was no longer anything interesting to watch. After arriving at Osborne Industries, Fang Ye took the dedicated elevator straight to the top-floor boardroom. Upon arriving at the boardroom, he noticed that the atmosphere was somewhat strange. His gaze swept across the room, and he realized that Norman Osborn hadn't arrived yet. "Mr. Fang has arrived." Seeing Fang Ye, everyone smiled and greeted him. They didn't dare to underestimate Fang Ye. The current Fang Ye was not someone they could offend. "Mr. Fang, you might have already heard the news. The Explore Aerospace Group is preparing to acquire Osborne Industries. Do you have any opinions on this? In our Chinese saying, businessmen prioritize profits. As long as there is profit, everything can be discussed, right?" "That's wonderful." Seeing that Fang Ye didn't seem to have any objections, Maxwell let out a sigh of relief. He had already discussed with the other directors that if the Explore Aerospace Group offered a reasonable price, they would be ready to sell Osborne Industries. However, they didn't dare to ignore Fang Ye's opinion. Therefore, after Fang Ye arrived, Maxwell asked for his opinion. In addition, they had been keeping the news about the Explore Aerospace Group wanting to acquire the company a secret from Norman Osborn. This was because Norman Osborn would absolutely not agree to sell the company, no matter how high the price offered by the Explore Aerospace Group. Mr. Fang, let's meet again when we have the time. After saying a few words, Maxwell returned to his seat. Fang Ye smiled lightly, agreeing to meet again, but his gaze turned towards the entrance because Norman Osborn had arrived. Norman Osborn had a smile on his face, obviously in a good mood. Chapter 29, Shareholders Meeting. After Norman Osborn's arrival, the shareholders' meeting officially began. Norman Osborn sat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, a faint smile always on his lips. From this, it could be seen that Norman Osborn was in a very good mood. The reason was that 3 days ago, Osborn Industries signed a major contract with the U.S. military, a large order that would sustain Osborn Industries' prosperity for 3 years. Ahem. After a slight cough, attracting everyone's attention, Norman Osborn finally spoke with a smile. Everyone, I have good news to announce. From today onwards, Osborn Industries will surpass Explore Aerospace and Stark Industries, becoming the largest supplier to the U.S. military. In other words, costs will be reduced, profits will increase, and our company's stock has never been higher than it is now. That's great. So, we're ready to sell the company. Norman Osborn's speech was suddenly interrupted by a voice. The atmosphere in the boardroom became particularly tense. Norman Osborn's smile froze, and his expression turned ugly as he looked at the people present. Finally, his gaze fell on Duncan, one of the directors. Duncan was the third largest shareholder of Osborn Industries, controlling 12% of the company's shares, and his words carried weight in the boardroom. Duncan, do you know what you're talking about? I certainly know what I'm saying, and I'll take responsibility for my words. Currently, Explore Aerospace is raising funds for expansion, and they have a great interest in Osborn Industries. The terms they've offered are very generous, so after discussing it, we've decided to sell Osborn Industries. Duncan held a cup of coffee, his face wearing a cold smile as he looked at Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn's smile disappeared, and anger surged in his heart. He looked at Duncan and spoke with a grim tone. Why did no one tell me about this? They didn't want to provoke a struggle among the senior management. If you were here, the deal wouldn't have been approved, Duncan said indifferently. Before Norman Osborn could say anything, another director added fuel to the fire. That's right, Explore Aerospace wants to acquire the complete Osborn Industries, so they don't want to cause a power struggle. Furthermore, Mr. Osborn, the board of directors will sign your resignation letter within a month, which means you won't be the chairman of Osborn Industries anymore. At this point, the other directors began to speak one after another, and without a doubt, they all supported selling Osborn Industries. Because they had already discussed this beforehand, today's board meeting was meant to confront Norman Osborn. Although the sudden appearance of Fang Ye caught them off guard, fortunately, Fang Ye didn't object to selling the company. The entire board of directors rebelling was almost unheard of, which showed how disappointed they were in Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn was clever, and that was something everyone had to admit. However, at most, he could be considered an outstanding scientist, not an outstanding businessman or boss. But for Norman Osborn, Fang Ye could understand. After all, the family's hereditary disease had always been a heavy burden on him. Over the years, Norman Osborn had focused so much on researching human enhancement drugs that he had little time to manage the company. Perhaps because of this, the current situation had arisen. The shareholders' meeting came to an end like this, and all that was left was for the board of directors to announce Norman Osborn's dismissal after the World Expo. But this is also good. If this group of directors doesn't die, I won't have a chance to control Osborn Industries. Time for Fang Ye's preparations was running out. He needed to raise funds in a short amount of time. To take control of Osborn Industries, he needed a substantial amount of money. If he relied solely on UI Fund, Fang Ye wouldn't be able to gather that much money in a short time. Fortunately, there were many people supporting him behind the scenes. The members of UI Fund were all multi-billionaires, and each of them investing a sum would be enough. Behind Explore Aerospace was a big consortium, and behind Fang Ye, his influence was not weak either. However, Fang Ye understood that even if he supported Norman Osborn, it wouldn't change the outcome. The tide was unstoppable, and no one could change it. Norman Osborn's situation was something Fang Ye could only say he brought upon himself. Fang Ye had already noticed that Norman Osborn had changed. He didn't need to guess, Norman Osborn had definitely injected himself with the human enhancement drug. The research on the human enhancement drug was jointly conducted by 2 laboratories, and since it was a joint research, the data and information were naturally shared. Thanks to live experiments, the research on the human enhancement drug made significant progress in just 2 months. After resolving the defect of personality splitting, Norman Osborn couldn't wait to inject himself with the human enhancement drug. Norman Osborn's luck was obviously good, otherwise, he wouldn't be standing here today. But looking at Norman Osborn's appearance, his emotions were very unstable. After all, Norman Osborn was just an ordinary person, unlike Fang Ye, who had the ability to control his emotions. Now, being provoked by the board of directors, Norman Osborn was obviously losing control, but fortunately, he didn't lose his reason and go on a killing spree. Norman Osborn's current situation was something he had brought upon himself. Chapter 30, Carnival Celebration. The reason why Fang Ye wanted to take over Oscorp was that Oscorp Industries was different from Stark Industries. Oscorp Industries could still function normally even without Norman Osborn, but Stark Industries would lose its sole pillar if Tony Stark was missing. Fang Ye could take over Oscorp Industries, but he would never take over Stark Industries. Furthermore, even if it required great sacrifices, Fang Ye had to acquire Oscorp Industries because of the human enhancement serum. He needed to have complete control over it so he could rest assured. In the past, Fang Ye indeed looked down on human enhancement serums to some extent. But now, Fang Ye changed his mind. Because the human enhancement serum had already solved its biggest flaw, Fang Ye believed that as long as some time passed, Dr. Connors could completely perfect the human enhancement serum. Then Fang Ye could start cultivating his own team of super soldiers. Thus, Fang Ye would never allow the human enhancement serum to leak out, giving any other forces a chance to meddle with it. Especially the US military and S.H.I.E.L.D, with their official backgrounds. If they got hold of the serum, they could certainly create a team of super soldiers. Even if he had to destroy the human enhancement serum, Fang Ye wouldn't let other forces get their hands on it. Because if his plan went smoothly and he managed to retrieve the cosmic cube in the future, those forces would become potential enemies, and Fang Ye couldn't afford to give them any advantage. Although the human enhancement serum was jointly developed by 2 research laboratories, it ultimately belonged to Oscorp Industries. Moreover, in order to conduct human experiments and reach an agreement with William Stryker, both research laboratories had to share the cost. The key was that a contract was signed from the beginning, stating that the development of the human enhancement serum would be led by Oscorp Industries, and the research results would also belong to Oscorp Industries. Even if Fang Ye wanted to change his mind now, he had no reason to do so. Therefore, the only way was to acquire Oscorp Industries. In fact, Fang Ye had always planned to do so, otherwise, wouldn't he be preparing a wedding dress for others? After working hard to perfect the human enhancement serum, was it just for enhancing physical fitness? After the shareholders' meeting, Fang Ye returned to the UI building. After returning, Fang Ye immediately ordered the mobilization of funds to acquire Oscorp Industries. He had to make preparations in advance. Time was running out, and he could only raise as much funds as possible during this period. Time flew by, and within a week, Fang Ye raised a substantial amount of funds. Not only did the UI fund mobilize almost all of its liquid assets, but Fang Ye also personally persuaded many members of the UI Foundation to invest. These members of the UI Foundation were all billionaires, each contributing several $billion, which was enough to shock the world. In just 1 week, Fang Ye raised $800 billion in funds. With $800 billion, Fang Ye had about an 80% chance of successfully attacking Oscorp's stock market and acquiring Oscorp Industries. In other areas, Fang Ye might not be able to surpass other forces, especially those deeply rooted in New York. But in the financial field, who could match him? Of course, Fang Ye continued to raise funds. His goal was to reach $1 trillion. With $1 trillion, he not only had a chance to acquire 50% of Oscorp Industries shares, but he also had a chance to make those forces that coveted Oscorp Industries suffer a big loss. On the top floor of UI building, in the boardroom, Fang Ye sat on the sofa, crossed his legs, held a glass of wine in his right hand, and enjoyed his leisure time. At this moment, a knock on the door sounded, and the door was pushed open. Jennifer, dressed formally, walked in slowly and handed Fang Ye an invitation letter. "Boss, the World Carnival banquet will be held 3 days later. This is your invitation. I don't know if you are interested in attending. If you're not interested, I'll decline on your behalf." "No need, I will make time to attend." Taking the invitation letter, Fang Ye smiled lightly. He had been waiting for the World Carnival banquet to be held. Now, he just hoped that Norman Osborn wouldn't disappoint him. Only when those board members were dead could Fang Ye seize the opportunity to acquire Oscorp Industries. If those board members were still alive, it would be almost wishful thinking for Fang Ye to forcefully acquire Oscorp Industries. The current situation was different from the original plot. In the original plot, the human enhancement serum had a fatal flaw: it caused personality splits. When Norman Osborn accidentally injected the serum, a second personality emerged, one that only knew destruction and chaos. It was under the control of this second personality that Norman Osborn transformed into the Green Goblin and did all those crazy things. But now, the fatal flaw had been resolved. Although the serum still had side effects, making people lose control of their emotions and easily become angry, it would also lead to long-term personality distortions. Now, Fang Ye wasn't sure if Norman Osborn would repeat the killings. Would he wipe out all the board members? Thinking about this, Fang Ye frowned. Those board members must die, otherwise, his plan couldn't be implemented. At the same time, Fang Ye was prepared for the worst. If things went terribly wrong, he would destroy the human enhancement serum. In any case, he couldn't let other forces get hold of it. Go out for now. Yes. Waving his hand, Fang Ye asked Jennifer to leave. After Jennifer left, Fang Ye took a sip of wine and called out Deadpool's name. Wilson. Boss. As soon as Fang Ye spoke, Deadpool appeared in front of him. The energy circulation system matrix had been fully mastered by Dr. William, and now only the core metal material that operated the matrix was missing. So, the spatial teleportation belt and the 2 adamantium blades had been returned to Deadpool 2 days ago. Wilson, you've been a mercenary and an assassin. You should be familiar with the assassin world, right? Boss, are you thinking of hiring an assassin? Deadpool suddenly became interested. If Fang Ye wanted someone to be assassinated, he could take the job and earn a hefty sum of money. However, the next words from Fang Ye made Deadpool's smile freeze on his face. I am indeed thinking of hiring assassins, but you are my bodyguard, and many people know this. Therefore, you cannot act. Boss, I can teleport through space without being detected. Unwilling to accept this, Deadpool tried to argue. Fang Ye remained calm and waved his hand, cutting off Deadpool's words. No need. You should know other assassins. I mean people with special abilities, whether they are mutants or supercriminals. All right. I do know a few capable assassins, 2 of whom are mutants. Realizing that Fang Ye had made up his mind, Deadpool reluctantly spilled the beans. After some time, Fang Ye smiled and nodded from time to time. Finally, he whispered a few words, instructing Deadpool to make arrangements. Fang Ye wasn't planning to assassinate anyone, he was just being cautious. Because those board members had to die. If something unexpected happened, and Norman Osborn didn't go to the World Carnival banquet, then Fang Ye would have to let those assassins take action. If, as in the original plot, Norman Osborn transformed into the Green Goblin, then those assassins would be responsible for cleaning up the mess. Anyway, Fang Ye didn't plan to let any of those board members live. Fang Ye did things with a purpose, using any means necessary. Fang Ye didn't care about the process, all he cared about was the result he needed. 3 days later, the World Carnival banquet was held as scheduled. This edition of the banquet was hosted by Aerospace Exploration Group because the Carnival banquet was hosted by different industrial groups each year. The banquet not only invited many social celebrities, but also several Hollywood giants were present. To true high society, actors were always just actors. At this moment, a luxurious limited edition Osler's limousine appeared at the end of the street, immediately attracting the attention of many people. A/N, consider giving some power stones for this novel. Your support is my motivation. Chapter 31, The Green Goblin. A luxurious limited edition Osler's limousine appeared at the end of the street, immediately attracting the attention of many people. The World Carnival banquet was not lacking in billionaires attending. However, not many people could afford such a luxurious car, and among all the cars parked in the parking lot, there were only a few that were this luxurious. As the car approached, quite a few people walked over with humble smiles on their faces. Because the owner of the car was someone worth fawning over. Mr. Fang is here. Yes? I didn't expect Mr. Fang to participate in this banquet. Mr. Fang, nice to meet you. I am a director of UI Fund. It's a pleasure to know you. Mr. Fang, I am the CEO of Oscorp Industries. People with certain status all wanted to get to know Fang Ye and took the opportunity to present their business cards. Others could only envy, but they knew their place. After exchanging greetings with Fang Ye, they stepped aside. The World Carnival banquet had quite a few Wall Street elite attendees. For them, being able to exchange a few words with Fang Ye was already a great honor. The title of the financial king was not just a claim. Fang Ye's achievements in the financial world had put him on a pedestal, creating one miracle and legend after another. Although he might not dare to claim the same in other fields, Fang Ye's influence in the financial world was absolutely unprecedented. Fang Ye didn't put on airs and smiled in response to those who greeted him. Jennifer, who was behind Fang Ye, received the business cards from those people with a cold and arrogant attitude. She wouldn't show a good attitude to these opportunists. Jennifer was already exceptionally beautiful, and now in her blue evening gown, she exuded an extraordinary aura. However, everyone knew that Jennifer belonged to Fang Ye, and no one dared to harbor any crooked thoughts. Handing over their business cards in an orderly manner, they didn't dare to look at Jennifer more than necessary. Deadpool followed closely behind Fang Ye, remaining silent and constantly observing the surroundings in this crowded place. At this moment, a man in a white evening suit, wearing a top hat, and a red rose pinned to his chest, around 30 years old, approached with a smile. He seemed to be one of the organizers from Aerospace Exploration Group. The man came before Fang Ye, extending a respectful invitation. Mr. Fang, hello. I am the organizer of the banquet, Casper Smith. The official start of the banquet is still half an hour away. Mr. Fang, please come with me upstairs. Mr. Smith, lead the way. Fang Ye smiled lightly and nodded. Casper Smith smiled politely and made a gesture to lead the way. Many people attended the banquet, including billionaires, government officials, actors, and singers, among others. Ordinary elite figures could only stay on the 1st to 3rd floors. Actors and singers stayed on the 4th to 6th floors. Ordinary billionaires stayed on the 7th to 9th floors. Above the 10th floor, it was no longer for ordinary people, only the extremely wealthy and prestigious had the qualifications to enter. Those who had access to the floors above the 10th were all billionaires with assets worth tens of billions and had certain status. The most luxurious floor of the banquet was undoubtedly the 15th floor. And only those qualified to step foot on the 15th floor were truly distinguished individuals, either top billionaires or government officials. As someone with Fang Ye's status, he naturally received an invitation to the 15th floor. In fact, people with similar status to Fang Ye rarely attended the World Carnival banquet. The banquet had invited Fang Ye in the past 2 years, but he had declined politely at that time. This time, if it weren't for something else, Fang Ye wouldn't have attended either. Mr. Fang, I didn't expect you to participate in this year's banquet. You know, you haven't attended in previous years. Yes, but it's worth having a toast with Mr. Fang if we can see him. Mr. Fang is here, and we have a backbone now. As Fang Ye entered the 15th floor hall, many people came over, most of them acquaintances and members of the UEI fund. Fang Ye swept his gaze and quickly took stock. In the 15th floor hall, there were approximately 150 people, forming 6 circles of connections. Representing 6 major forces, the members of the UEI fund had gathered together in one circle before Fang Ye's arrival, forming a network of connections. Fang Ye's arrival naturally attracted the attention of many people, and one by one, they greeted him. After dealing with those people, Fang Ye proposed with a smile, let's go and sit over there. Yes, it's tiring to stand here. Let's listen to Mr. Fang and find a place to sit and chat. Right, Mr. Fang, please lead the way. Naturally, everyone wouldn't dare to be impolite and gave Fang Ye face. Led by Fang Ye, dozens of people walked to a corner of the hall and chatted idly. As time passed, the banquet officially began. In fact, after discovering that Norman Osborn did not attend the World Carnival banquet, Fang Ye already had a good idea of the situation. The board of directors had already stated that they would dismiss Norman Osborn and sell Oscorp Industries after the carnival. Since Norman Osborn hadn't come, it was evident that he had made a decision. After the banquet started, many wealthy people walked out of the hall and gathered on the balcony outside. The square below the balcony was crowded, and a stage in the center of the square had a singer performing, creating a lively atmosphere. Fang Ye surveyed his surroundings and smiled, because he saw the shareholders of Oscorp Industries celebrating on the balcony. Holding a glass of wine in his hand, resting his arm on the balcony's railing, looking down, Fang Ye unexpectedly saw someone. He couldn't help but smile. The person seemed to sense something and looked up towards the sky. After discovering that the person on the balcony was Fang Ye, whom he had met before, the person smiled back as if greeting him. This person was none other than Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Peter Parker shifted his gaze away and picked up his camera, preparing to take some photos. However, his brow furrowed suddenly, and he vaguely felt a sense of danger approaching. He couldn't help but scan his surroundings with suspicion. All of this was seen by Fang Ye, and he couldn't help but admire Spider-Man's sensing ability. Compared to Fang Ye's precognition, Peter Parker's ability to sense danger was quite impressive. Fang Ye's gaze turned to the sky in the distance, where he saw a blurry figure flying towards them at high speed. Seeing this figure, Fang Ye finally felt completely at ease. Norman Osborn, it's up to you now. Don't disappoint me. Fang Ye whispered in his heart and then said to Deadpool, who was beside him. Wilson, let's go. Deadpool didn't say anything and followed closely behind Fang Ye. As they walked, Fang Ye paused for a moment and whispered to Deadpool, Wilson, you'd better stay behind. If you have the chance, try to save our people, but be careful not to arouse suspicion. Boss, is there a bonus for rescuing people? No. Fang Ye's mouth twitched, and he said succinctly. However, afraid that Deadpool wouldn't put in his best effort, Fang Ye added. But if you save their lives at the right time, I believe they will repay you. After all, you are my bodyguard, and they will give you some face. Boss, rest assured, I will save people appropriately during a crisis. Deadpool immediately showed great enthusiasm and almost promised. But Deadpool also remembered Fang Ye's instructions. To avoid arousing suspicion, he could only save those people's lives when the time was right. After all, if other forces suffered heavy casualties while the members of the UEI Fund remained unharmed, it would not be surprising if people suspected that the attack was related to the UEI Fund. Not long after Fang Ye left, a strange laughter came from outside the balcony. He, I'm out, right. Following that, an explosion resounded, and the entire building shook. Fang Ye smiled at this, as Norman Osborn, now the Green Goblin, was still as ruthless as ever, not disappointing him. Chapter 32, Taking Over Oscorp. He. Boom, boom, boom. The arrogant laughter of the Green Goblin, the deafening sound of explosions, and the screams of people around intertwined and echoed throughout the street. The Green Goblin went on a rampage, throwing incredibly powerful pumpkin bombs into the crowd on the balcony. The people on the balcony suffered greatly, and their bodies were blown to pieces by the explosions. The square below the balcony had already descended into chaos, with people desperately trying to escape, and occasional stampedes occurring. It's Spider-Man, Spider-Man is here. Suddenly, amidst the chaotic crowd, someone exclaimed in surprise. Hearing this, everyone looked up and saw a red and blue figure swinging like a pendulum, flying towards the Green Goblin and kicking him away. Spider-Man's arrival seemed to stabilize the situation. During the fight with the Green Goblin, Spider-Man occasionally rescued people, and the battle had become intense. Spider-Man, take down that ugly guy. Everyone, don't push each other, Spider-Man is here to save us. Spider-Man, go for it. In the 13th floor living room, Fang Ye sat on the sofa, sipping red wine. The sounds of explosions outside occasionally reached his ears, but it didn't affect him at all. After hearing the commotion outside, Fang Ye knew that the courageous little Spider-Man had come forward to help. But Fang Ye wasn't concerned about that. He was more interested in whether the shareholders of Oscorp Industries were all dead by now. Only when those shareholders were all gone could Fang Ye proceed with his plan without worries. Are those Oscorp Industries shareholders all dead by now? Fang Ye muttered to himself, because even if they hadn't all died yet, the 2 assassins he had sent would take care of the rest. Those 2 mutant assassins might not be that powerful among mutants, but dealing with ordinary people was a piece of cake for them. Fang Ye was also intrigued by the Green Goblin's pumpkin bombs. Those were undoubtedly high-tech products. Although Fang Ye had undergone body enhancement with the human enhancement formula and possessed physical attributes far beyond ordinary people, he couldn't guarantee that he could survive a direct hit from a pumpkin bomb. If I have the chance, I must get my hands on those Green Goblin bombs. It seems that Oscorp Industries is hiding a lot of good stuff. Fang Ye became even more eager to acquire Oscorp Industries. Fang Ye suddenly sensed someone nearby and turned his gaze to find Deadpool silently appearing next to him. Boss, I saved 4 people, and the others have been taken care of. Let's go to the balcony and enjoy the fight between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. Hearing the good news, Fang Ye was pleased. As they walked out of the 13th floor living room and reached the balcony, they saw the Green Goblin chasing after Spider-Man using a glider. The glider's guns were firing wildly. Norman Osborn, who had lost control of himself, had completely transformed into the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin had no regard for the innocent, and although Spider-Man was not hit, dozens of civilians were affected. Movies were always just movies, and when Fang Ye saw the casualties, he realized that the situation was much more serious than he had imagined. At least 3,000 people were affected by the accident, with at least 700 confirmed deaths. The square was already crowded, so only 700 casualties amidst the chaos could be considered somewhat lucky. The incident had stirred the entire New York City, and as soon as the media learned about it, the explosive news made headlines. Oscorp Industries sunset on the Hudson. Natural disaster or man-made? Oscorp Industries to close down. Who will replace Oscorp? Waiting for 5 hours, news about the deaths of all the shareholders of Oscorp Industries was finally revealed. Fang Ye stood quietly by the window, extinguishing his cigarette. He turned to Carl and said, "You can start selling the stocks now, but be cautious about the selling rate." Yes. Carl was excited because today he would personally be involved in the acquisition of Oscorp Industries, a feat he had never dared to dream of before. As an analyst, this was an honor for him. This honor was bestowed upon him by the godlike man before him. At least in Carl's heart, Fang Ye was the god of finance. With Fang Ye holding 21% of Oscorp Industries shares, the traders started manipulating the selling of the stocks one after another. Chapter 33, S.H.I.E.L.D. In fact, after the Green Demon attack incident at the Carnival banquet, the New York City Bureau took it extremely seriously and immediately implemented a comprehensive news blockade. This was the usual approach for handling emergencies. The reason why the incident was exposed so quickly was partly due to Fang Ye's behind-the-scenes manipulation, as he deliberately fanned the flames. The earlier the incident was exposed, the more advantageous it would be for Fang Ye, as he wouldn't give other forces time to prepare. After the news was exposed, the whole United States was shaken, and countless media outlets followed suit in reporting. Among them, many media outlets reported on Spider-Man and the Green Demon, speculating on their identities. Some media outlets demanded the government to take severe action against criminals and capture the murderous Green Demon. At the same time, the public strongly demanded to know the truth. The New York City Bureau had no choice but to release casualty data, nearly 3,000 injured and over 700 dead, a shocking number that fueled public anger. Under immense pressure, the New York City Bureau held a press conference and promised to capture the Green Demon as soon as possible and give the citizens an explanation. With this approach, the situation cooled down slightly, and at least the citizens no longer marched in protest. Among the casualty data released by the New York City Bureau, Osborne Industries suffered the most, with almost all members of the board of directors losing their lives. After the news was exposed, the stock of Osborne Industries kept falling. To make matters worse, Fang Ye, also known as the Financial King, gave up on Osborne Industries and began selling the stocks he held. Fang Ye's actions caused a tremendous shock, and countless observing investors followed suit, selling their shares in Osborne Industries. In just 1 hour, the stock price of Osborne Industries plummeted by 20 percentage points. The decline of Osborne Industries seemed unstoppable. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, the stock price of Osborne Industries hit an all-time low. During this time, many forces wanted to take advantage of Osborne Industries, but how could Fang Ye allow that? After all the hard work he had put in until now, Fang Ye would never let others reap the benefits. Fang Ye had made sufficient preparations and warned those forces with a bitter lesson: you can't touch what's mine. The fate of those forces was nothing but losing everything and retreating in embarrassment. The next morning when the market opened, the stock price of Osborne Industries continued to drop, and the major shareholders could no longer sit still, starting to sell their shares at low prices. Fang Ye wasted no time and bought those shares at low prices. In the UXE building, on the 33rd floor, Fang Ye stood quietly in the hall, hands behind his back, staring at the large screen. Although he had stayed up all night, Fang Ye was still full of energy due to his enhanced physique, feeling no fatigue. At this moment, Carl walked over, hesitant to speak. "Boss, when should we start buying Osborne Industries?" "No rush, wait until the stock price drops a bit more, then start the comprehensive acquisition." Carl didn't say anything more. After 2 years of experience, he knew that Fang Ye's decisions were never wrong. As Fang Ye expected, 1 hour after the market opened, the major shareholders of Osborne Industries began selling their stocks at low prices. "It seems like it's time for a comprehensive harvest." A faint smile appeared on Fang Ye's lips as he beckoned to Carl. "Carl, start the acquisition." "Yes." Upon hearing this, Carl's spirit was lifted. Osborne Industries was one of the largest conglomerates in the United States. If they could successfully acquire it, it would be a great achievement in his career. The acquisition process went smoothly, beyond everyone's expectations. In just 1 hour, Fang Ye had acquired 30% of Osborne Industries shares. Things progressed smoothly, and there was no interference during the process. Fang Ye was not surprised. Those stock market tycoons were shrewd and knew that they wouldn't gain any advantage if they challenged Fang Ye's initiative. And if they couldn't benefit, they would end up offending Fang Ye without any gain. They are all cunning old foxes. Fang Ye never expected his plan to deceive those stock market tycoons successfully. He had prepared many backup plans to deal with them, but he didn't expect that they wouldn't take the bait at all, realizing that they couldn't gain any advantage from Fang Ye's actions. But that was for the best. Fang Ye didn't want any complications in the acquisition. After spending $4 trillion, Fang Ye successfully acquired 42% of Osborne Industries shares. However, Fang Ye's target was to own more than 50% of the shares, so he spent an additional $150 billion to finally acquire 54% of the shares. From now on, Osborne Industries officially belonged to Fang Ye. The later $150 billion spent only gained him an additional 12% of the shares. This was because Fang Ye's aggressive acquisition had caused the stock price of Osborne Industries to slowly recover. "Carl, you can stop now." Fang Ye chose to stop because he knew that Norman Osborn still held 40% of the shares and wouldn't sell them. "Yahoo, we did it. We've created a miracle again. Hail to the boss." Cheers filled the hall after Fang Ye's words. They had personally acquired Osborne Industries. If this were 2 years ago, they wouldn't even have dared to dream about it. This was the biggest miracle they had achieved in their entire careers. Fang Ye smiled faintly, recognizing many of these people as his old comrades who had followed him since the establishment of the fund. He still remembered their lofty promises at the beginning: "You chose me, and I will lead you to the peak." And now, Fang Ye had undoubtedly fulfilled his promise. "I have booked the Empire Hotel. Carl, you can take everyone there to celebrate." "Boss, aren't you coming with us?" "I have other things to attend to this time, so I won't go." "Have fun." Thank you, boss. After the acquisition of Osborne Industries was completed, Fang Ye returned to his office on the top floor. Sitting at his desk, Fang Ye turned on his laptop, opened a special software, and sent an anonymous email. This special software had stealth features and was developed by Tony Stark, ensuring that no one could trace the sender's identity. After sending the email, Fang Ye closed the laptop. S.H.I.E.L.D, don't disappoint me. Inside the S.H.I.E.L.D headquarters, in the director's office, Nick Fury, the one-eyed man, sat at his desk, examining the documents. At this moment, there was a knock on the door, and without raising his head, Nick Fury said, "Come in. Director, there's important intelligence." A woman with a black tight-fitting suit and a radiant demeanor, Maria Hill, one of Nick Fury's capable assistants, entered the room and reported. Nick Fury took the documents and browsed through them. After a moment, he furrowed his brows. "Hill, where did this intelligence come from? Have you verified it?" "Director, I received an anonymous email not long ago. I've already had people verify the intelligence, and there's a high possibility that Norman Osborn is the Green Demon." Nick Fury wasn't surprised that Norman Osborn was the Green Demon. What puzzled him was who sent the anonymous email and for what purpose. Currently, SHIELD was already troubled by the Green Demon incident. The Council had issued orders to capture the Green Demon as soon as possible and give an explanation to the citizens of New York. Nearly 3,000 injured and over 700 dead, such a major incident immediately alarmed the Council. Super criminals occasionally appeared in New York, but incidents with such significant casualties were rare. After pondering for a moment, Nick Fury made up his mind. Regardless of who sent the email and for what purpose, SHIELD had to capture the Green Demon. Order Hawkeye and Black Widow to take action. Also, provide Falcon the Green Demon bomb. If possible, bring them back to SHIELD headquarters. Yes. Chapter 34, Nick Fury. Both the glider wings and the Green Demon bomb were undoubtedly high-tech products. However, SHIELD wasn't lacking in high-tech capabilities, as they could even develop aircraft carriers. While they might be interested in the glider wings and the Green Demon bomb, they weren't worth Nick Fury's attention. Instead, what SHIELD needed the most were the human enhancement potions or the Green Giant Serum. After pondering for a moment, Nick Fury continued, "The most important thing is the human enhancement potion. I suspect that the human enhancement potion has already been perfected. Otherwise, Norman Osborn's physical attributes wouldn't have suddenly improved so much. We must get our hands on the human enhancement potion." "I understand." The Marvel world was filled with various forces, and while SHIELD might not be the most powerful, it certainly excelled in intelligence gathering. With its official background, SHIELD had a natural advantage that other forces couldn't match. SHIELD had been aware of Osborne Industries' project to develop a human enhancement potion. However, at that time, the human enhancement potion had a fatal flaw: personality split. Therefore, both SHIELD and Hydra chose to remain passive. The fruit wasn't ripe yet, and picking it prematurely would be a waste, so they were all waiting. But later, Fang Ye unexpectedly appeared, demonstrating extraordinary financial capabilities and averting S.H.I.E.L.D's attention. Following that, Fang Ye rose quickly, and recently, he even obtained the Green Giant Serum. He also reached an agreement with Norman Osborn and acquired the human enhancement potion that SHIELD had been coveting for a long time. At this point, both SHIELD and the hidden Hydra couldn't sit still anymore. Let alone the human enhancement potion, the unique Green Giant Serum alone was enough to make SHIELD and Hydra interested. However, before they could take any action, Fang Ye took the initiative and launched a threat. Hydra was threatened by Fang Ye because they weren't sure about the extent of Fang Ye's power. They chose to temporarily compromise and appease Fang Ye while waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Nick Fury was even more troubled because not only was SHIELD facing pressure from council members, but he also discovered that there seemed to be some instability within SHIELD. For this reason, he had to temporarily cancel the plan and recall Natasha, who was undercover with Fang Ye. Time dragged on, and it had been over 2 months. Now, the Green Demon had appeared and committed a massive crime that shocked the entire United States. The Council had issued an order to capture the Green Demon at all costs and resolve the situation as soon as possible. Now, they had learned that the Green Demon was actually Norman Osborn. Nick Fury knew that the opportunity had come. While capturing Norman Osborn, SHIELD could openly seek the human enhancement potion from Osborne Industries. Moreover, Nick Fury suspected that the human enhancement potion might have been perfected. In their intelligence reports, they had already noticed the difference in Fang Ye, which clearly indicated that he had injected the human enhancement potion. Now that Norman Osborn had also injected it, and both cases were clearly successful, it undoubtedly told Nick Fury that the human enhancement potion had been perfected. Even if it hadn't been completely perfected, the fatal flaw had certainly been resolved. Otherwise, Fang Ye wouldn't have injected the human enhancement potion without being certain of the outcome. Thinking that the human enhancement potion might have been perfected, Nick Fury's eagerness grew. "He'll arrange for me to meet Fang Ye tomorrow." "Understood, Director." You can leave now. Continue pursuing the Green Demon as soon as possible." "Yes." Knowing the man who appeared silently in New York 2 years ago, Nick Fury had always attached great importance to Fang Ye. Nick Fury had considered trying to recruit Fang Ye into S.H.I.E.L.D, but based on his understanding of Fang Ye, he knew that there was a 90% chance Fang Ye would refuse. 3 hours later, Nick Fury received a call. "Natasha, did you capture the Green Demon?" "The mission failed. The Green Demon escaped, but we have tracked his whereabouts, and he can't escape." "Did you get the human enhancement potion?" "When we arrived at Osborn Industries, someone had beaten us to it. Moreover, Osborn Industries has been acquired by a mysterious force. It's likely they also moved the human enhancement potion." Nick Fury fell silent upon hearing this. While capturing the Green Demon could be done slowly, obtaining the human enhancement potion was of utmost importance. "Who do you think acquired Osborn Industries?" "It should be UXZ Fund. I suspect that the anonymous email was also sent by Fang Ye to us." "Your judgment is correct. I've been suspecting Fang Ye all along, so I've arranged to meet him tomorrow and give him one last chance." "Do you want to recruit him into S.H.I.E.L.D? He might not agree. We have to give it a try to know." "All right, continue pursuing the Green Demon. I'll handle Fang Ye personally." "Yes." After hanging up the phone, Nick Fury's expression darkened. Nobody liked being used as a pawn. Indeed, Nick Fury had intended to recruit Fang Ye. Once Fang Ye joined S.H.I.E.L.D, whether it was the human enhancement potion or the green giant serum, it would eventually belong to S.H.I.E.L.D. But would Fang Ye agree? Nick Fury wasn't confident at all. "I'm really looking forward to meeting you tomorrow." UXZ Building, top floor office. Fang Ye had a smile on his face as he held Jennifer's slender waist, and his fingers roamed over her body, occasionally touching sensitive areas, making Jennifer blush. Fang Ye was truly delighted. He had completely gained control of Osborn Industries. Norman Osborn's research lab was now empty, as Fang Ye had moved everything to his own research lab in advance. As for those scientists, most of them had joined his team. The few stubborn ones were taken care of by Shu Long. Fang Ye wouldn't give these scientists who had participated in the development of the human enhancement potion a chance to be recruited by other forces. Since they were unwilling to work for him, they couldn't blame him for being ruthless. As for the technology in Osborn Industries, such as the glider wings and the Green Demon bomb, Fang Ye didn't take them back. Although those high-tech gadgets were good, similar technology existed in the world, such as similar flight equipment used by the military. "Boss, are you really going to meet Nick Fury tomorrow?" Jennifer was somewhat worried. As Fang Ye's most valued woman, she naturally knew more about certain things that ordinary people didn't. She was also aware of some of S.H.I.E.L.D's situation, and she knew a little bit about the purpose of Nick Fury's meeting with Fang Ye. "It's okay to meet him. Don't worry, S.H.I.E.L.D can't do anything to me." Fang Ye smiled confidently, and Jennifer became even more infatuated. Since she met this man, Jennifer's fate had changed. She cherished everything she had now, and she was willing to give everything to protect it. Although Jennifer knew that Fang Ye didn't love her, but her love for Fang Ye was enough. "Do you want me to?" "Huh." Fang Ye shook his head and smiled. This woman was so amorous that she had thrown away all restraint and modesty. Fang Ye wasn't a cowardly man, and naturally, he wouldn't disappoint his woman. After enjoying each other, Jennifer lay satisfied in Fang Ye's embrace. Fang Ye held a cigarette in his right hand and caressed Jennifer's back with his left hand. "Tomorrow morning, you go to Osborn Industries and hold a shareholders meeting to handle things over there. I'm currently busy and don't have time to manage it." "Okay." Jennifer had no objections because she had received news that Norman Osborn was on the run. The other shareholders were just small fries, and it wouldn't be difficult for Jennifer to handle them with her abilities. That was why Fang Ye felt at ease, allowing Jennifer to handle it. Noon the next day, in a famous coffee shop on Wall Street, a VIP room. Fang Ye sat quietly in his chair, holding a cup of coffee, while on the opposite side sat a one-eyed man. As Fang Ye observed Nick Fury was also sizing him up. In the end, Nick Fury broke the silence. "Mr. Fang Ye, you are younger than I imagined. Director Fury is too kind." Fang Ye smiled calmly. He had a vague idea of the reason why Nick Fury wanted to meet him, but he hadn't given much thought to joining S.H.I.E.L.D. Chapter 35, Forbidden Zone of God. Although Fang Ye was already 27 years old, due to his pampered lifestyle, He looked very young and youthful. Later, he injected the human enhancement potion, making him appear even younger. If one were to judge solely based on his appearance, he would seem around 22 at most. The human enhancement potion had many similarities with the super soldier serum, such as its effect of slowing down the metabolism. Nick Fury put down his coffee cup and fell silent for a moment before saying, "Mr. Fang Ye, do you have any interest in joining S.H.I.E.L.D? Director Fury, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I currently have no intention of joining any organization. Mr. Fang Ye, won't you reconsider?" Fang Ye shook his head and smiled, lifting his coffee cup and remaining silent. Joining S.H.I.E.L.D? That was simply a joke? Fang Ye knew very well that S.H.I.E.L.D was after the human enhancement potion and the green giant serum. How could he possibly agree to that? Nick Fury had a beautiful plan in mind. If Fang Ye joined S.H.I.E.L.D, both the human enhancement potion and the green giant serum would eventually belong to them. Seeing that Fang Ye had made up his mind, Nick Fury sighed inwardly, knowing that further persuasion would be useless. He had to take another approach. "Mr. Fang Ye, the human enhancement potion developed by Osborne Industries should be in your hands, right? You don't have to deny it. S.H.I.E.L.D's intelligence system is beyond your imagination. In fact, we have been keeping an eye on it since Norman Osborn started developing it. I had planned to wait until the human enhancement potion was perfected before contacting Norman Osborn for cooperation. But unexpected incidents occurred during that period. Also, it seems that you have the green giant serum. Director Fury, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. I haven't obtained any human enhancement potion, and I've never even heard of the green giant serum." Fang Ye shook his head and interrupted Nick Fury. Since Fang Ye had already made up his mind, he would stubbornly deny it. He didn't believe that S.H.I.E.L.D would dare to openly seize it. Even if the human enhancement potion were destroyed, Fang Ye wouldn't let other forces get their hands on it. However, he was prepared for S.H.I.E.L.D to continue pursuing it in secret. Nick Fury frowned, considering many possibilities, but he never thought that Fang Ye would deny it. To obtain the human enhancement potion, Nick Fury had prepared various arguments, and he was confident he could persuade Fang Ye to hand it over. However, if Fang Ye didn't admit to it, those arguments would be useless. Nick Fury's face darkened, and he looked very displeased. "Mr. Fang Ye, this joke isn't funny at all. Are you doubting S.H.I.E.L.D's intelligence system? Even the most sophisticated instruments can make mistakes, let alone humans? Perhaps it's just an error in S.H.I.E.L.D's intelligence. After all, I know best whether I have obtained the human enhancement potion or the green giant serum." Fang Ye smiled calmly, setting down his coffee cup. Fang Ye felt there was no need to continue the conversation. He got up and straightened his collar. "Director Fury, it was a pleasure meeting you today, but I have some other matters to attend to." "Excuse me, Mr. Fang Ye, you should know that there are some things that the federal government must control. It won't allow them to fall into private hands. There are many forces interested in the human enhancement potion, not just S.H.I.E.L.D. Besides other secretive forces, even the military might not be as accommodating as S.H.I.E.L.D. Are you really confident that you can keep the human enhancement potion safe? How about cooperating with S.H.I.E.L.D? I promise the military and other forces won't trouble you anymore. Mr. Fang Ye, I hope you make a wise choice." Seeing that Fang Ye remained unyielding, Nick Fury had no choice but to be more forceful and slightly threatening. Fang Ye stopped in his tracks, turned around, and sneered, "Director Fury, in our country, there's a saying, better to be a broken jade than an intact roof tile. I don't know if you understand the meaning? Of course, the Chinese culture is vast and profound. It's understandable if you don't. I can send you a new Hanyu dictionary. After reading it, you might understand." Fang Ye's tone was calm and gentle, but his words were sharp and piercing. After speaking, Fang Ye no longer paid attention to Nick Fury and left the coffee shop with Deadpool. Watching Fang Ye's departing figure, Nick Fury's expression darkened. Since becoming the director of S.H.I.E.L.D, no one had dared to speak to him like this. However, Fang Ye's identity was extraordinary, and even with S.H.I.E.L.D's power, they wouldn't dare to openly target him. Pulling one hair triggers the whole body. S.H.I.E.L.D couldn't underestimate the forces behind Fang Ye. "You will regret this one day." The negotiation undoubtedly failed. S.H.I.E.L.D wanted to obtain the human enhancement potion, and Nick Fury had no choice but to come up with another plan. However, as long as they captured Norman Osborn, the human enhancement potion would still be in S.H.I.E.L.D's hands. Norman Osborn was the developer of the human enhancement potion, and no one was more familiar with it than him. Would Fang Ye make such a mistake? Certainly not. Otherwise, Fang Ye wouldn't have sent an anonymous email to reveal that Norman Osborn was the Green Demon. With Norman Osborn transformed into the Green Demon, it was nearly impossible for him to stay quietly in the research lab and develop the human enhancement potion with his current mental state. Although the human enhancement potion had resolved its fatal flaw, it still had a significant impact on the human mind. In recent times, Fang Ye had deeply experienced the side effects of the human enhancement potion. Uncontrollable bursts of anger occasionally erupted within him. If it weren't for his ability to control his emotions, he would have lost control long ago. UXZ Building, Underground Research Lab. After returning, Fang Ye headed straight to the lab. He had thoroughly offended S.H.I.E.L.D. today, and he knew that they wouldn't let it go easily. He needed to inject the Green Giant Serum as soon as possible. Entering the research center, Fang Ye found Dr. Stanton. Dr. Stanton, how is the research on the Green Giant Serum going? Boss, after the recent research, the fusion success rate has increased by 1%. Currently, the highest fusion success rate is 9%. Fang Ye lay on the sofa, rubbing his temples with both hands. Although the progress of the Green Giant Serum research had accelerated significantly after Dr. Stanton joined, Fang Ye had been waiting for a long time. The fusion success rate is still too low. Boss, we have done our best. You also know that as the development progresses, the progress will only slow down. How much more time is needed for the fusion success rate to surpass 10%? I mean the lowest fusion success rate. About a year. A year. You do your best. You can leave now. Fang Ye sighed inwardly. He couldn't afford to wait for a year with various forces eyeing the human enhancement potion. However, Fang Ye also knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, and he couldn't blame Dr. Stanton. But if it came to the worst, Fang Ye might have to take the risk of fusing with the Green Giant Serum. While Fang Ye was lost in thought, the door to the research center was pushed open, and an excited middle-aged man walked in. Fang Ye frowned slightly and looked up at the man. Boss, I did it. My research was successful. Oh, Dr. Cabot, let me see the research report. Fang Ye's interest was piqued. Among the many doctors in the lab, Dr. Cabot was working on the neural domain. His research project was codenamed Forbidden Zone of God, which was one of Fang Ye's more important projects. Dr. Cabot looked excited as he handed over a document to Fang Ye. Fang Ye accepted it and quickly skimmed through it. Dr. Cabot, you've done very well. Your funding will double every year from now on. Thank you, boss. The research project codenamed Forbidden Zone of God aimed to develop the neural domain. The human brain consists of the cerebrum and cerebellum, with the cerebrum further divided into the left and right hemispheres. The cerebrum governs all human activities, while the cerebellum controls all the nerves in the body, making them challenging to develop. The left and right hemispheres of the cerebrum each have their respective functions. The left hemisphere is responsible for rationality, thoroughly analyzing and judging the information obtained from the outside world. In simple terms, the information processed by the left hemisphere is relatively slow. Therefore, the human right hemisphere controls instincts. Under normal circumstances, the rationality of the left hemisphere suppresses the instincts of the right hemisphere, keeping human instincts in check. Only in very rare cases would instincts break through the barrier of rationality. For example, when a person's hand is burnt by fire, the instinct of the right hemisphere causes them to pull it back. That is the right hemisphere breaking through the rationality of the left hemisphere. Dr. Cabot divided the Forbidden Zone of God research project into 3 parts: the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, and the cerebellum. Originally, Dr. Cabot planned to start with the left hemisphere, but Fang Ye proposed that he focus on the right hemisphere first. After all, if the restrictions of human instincts were lifted, their power would be astonishing. Combined with the power of the Green Giant, the force unleashed would be absolutely terrifying. This was Fang Ye's initial plan, and now it seemed that Dr. Cabot had succeeded. Chapter 36, Super Soldier Project. Boss, the Forbidden Zone of God research project has achieved initial results. I want to apply for human experiments and also request additional funding. Dr. Cabot stood by, looking slightly embarrassed. In the past 6 months, this was already the 3rd time he had applied for funding. Fang Ye put down the research report, raised his head, and stared at Dr. Cabot. Dr. Cabot felt immense pressure from Fang Ye's gaze. After a moment, Fang Ye nodded slowly. I'll consider arranging the human experiments, and I approve the request for additional funding. Thank you, boss. I won't let you down. Dr. Cabot was very grateful for Fang Ye's unconditional trust. Fang Ye didn't say anything more, waved his hand, and asked Dr. Cabot to leave. Fang Ye wasn't short of money, but he wouldn't spend it recklessly. Applying for funding was not an issue, but the researchers needed to present results that were helpful to Fang Ye. After Dr. Cabot left, Fang Ye picked up the intercom on the desk and called Dr. Connor's laboratory. Dr. Connors, come to the research center now. Boss, please wait a moment. Dr. Connors didn't make Fang Ye wait for long and quickly arrived at the research center. Seeing Dr. Connor's arrival, Fang Ye pointed to the sofa. Take a seat and tell me about the progress of the human enhancement potion research. Boss, the research on the human enhancement potion has surprisingly progressed smoothly. After recent experiments, the side effects of the human enhancement potion have decreased by about 40%. I expect that within 3 months at most, I will have the confidence to perfect it. Let me see the research report. Yes. Knowing that Fang Ye liked to read reports, Dr. Connors had already prepared the data. Fang Ye accepted the materials and began to browse through them. As he read, Fang Ye quickly understood why the research on the human enhancement potion had been so smooth recently. It turned out that Dr. Connors had a sudden inspiration some time ago and combined his own research projects, the limb regeneration serum and the human enhancement potion. The fusion of the two serums had unexpected benefits. The side effects of the human enhancement potion decreased by about 40%, and its recovery effect increased by about 5 times. Although the 5-fold recovery effect referred only to physical recovery, the new human enhancement potion also possessed cellular regeneration abilities. While it couldn't compare to Deadpool's immortality or Dr. Connor's lizard regeneration in the original story, cellular regeneration was still formidable. Minor wounds could heal within minutes. Unfortunately, Fang Ye had already injected the potion and couldn't inject it a second time. Moreover, he wasn't interested in just cellular regeneration. His focus was on the successful fusion of the green giant serum, which he looked down upon if it only offered cellular regeneration. Additionally, Fang Ye had concerns because the new human enhancement potion was fundamentally different from the previous one. The old human enhancement potion improved human genes, but it was still based on human genes. However, the new human enhancement potion contained lizard genes, and its cellular regeneration ability was a result of these genes. The green giant serum had strong exclusivity, and Fang Ye had no idea whether it might react negatively to the lizard genes. If, due to the greed for cellular regeneration, the fusion of the green giant serum failed, it would be a true case of losing more than gaining. After finishing reading the report, Fang Ye fell into contemplation. Can the side effects of the human enhancement potion be reduced to at least 60% within a week? If I mobilize all the biologists in the research center and increase the number of live experiments, there's a possibility we could achieve the target you mentioned, boss. I leave this matter to you then. Dr. Stanton will continue researching the green giant serum, and you can freely deploy the other doctors and experts. I'll handle the matter of the test subjects. As long as the test subjects are available, I have confidence in completing the task. You can go now. I'll inform you later. Yes. After Dr. Connors left, Fang Ye lowered his head in thought. If the side effects of the human enhancement potion could be reduced to at least 60%, then the mercenaries who underwent the iron blood baptism could barely withstand the remaining side effects. With that, Fang Ye could implement his plan and create a super soldier team under his command. Currently, Fang Ye needed this kind of power. After all, he had not only offended S.H.I.E.L.D. today but also the Hydra was probably becoming impatient. Fang Ye took out his phone and dialed an anonymous number. Mr. Fang Ye, I'm Mystique. I've already sent the people you need. Please send someone to pick them up. The address is. I'll personally come over. Wait for me there. After ending the call, Fang Ye dialed Magneto's number and asked him to arrange some people to accompany him to transport the test subjects. The address given by Mystique wasn't far from UXZ building, an abandoned warehouse. When Fang Ye arrived with the team, 5 mutants came forward to welcome them, with Mystique leading the way. Mr. Fang Ye, it's nice to see you again. The people you need are in the warehouse. Fang Ye nodded at Mystique and swept his gaze inside the warehouse. He saw over 100 people, all tied up with ropes and gagged with tape. Fang Ye was satisfied and nodded again. He turned to instruct the mercenaries behind him. Take those people back. Yes. The mercenaries nodded quietly and went towards the warehouse. However, at this moment, a mutant suddenly stepped forward behind Mystique and blocked the mercenaries' path. Fang Ye's expression changed slightly. What was Magneto trying to do? Just as Fang Ye's expression shifted, Mystique's face also changed, but she quickly smiled. Charles, long time no see. Yes, Raven. The mutant greeted Mystique and then turned his gaze to Fang Ye, slightly furrowing his brows. Then, he smiled and said, Mr. Fang Ye, it's nice to meet you for the first time. I am Professor Charles Xavier. Professor X, I've heard of you. Many people prefer to call me that. Mr. Fang Ye, you should know my purpose, right? Professor X, are you also interested in the human enhancement potion? Chapter 37, The Third Ability. Professor X's abilities include telepathy and mental control. Facing him, Fang Ye appeared calm, but deep down, he couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. After all, nobody wants their memories to be intruded upon, and Fang Ye was no exception. Perhaps understanding Fang Ye's concerns, Professor X smiled and said, Mr. Fang, there's no need to be nervous. You are unique, and my abilities have difficulty affecting you. I'm unique. Fang Ye frowned, not understanding what Professor X meant. Professor X nodded with a smile and continued, I sense 3 different mental fluctuations within you, indicating that you possess 3 mental abilities. I don't know what the other 2 are, but I'm sure one of them is psychic shielding, which can defend against any mental attacks. Could it be the 3rd ability? Fang Ye only knew about 2 of his abilities, premonition of danger and emotional control. If Professor X wasn't lying, then the 3rd ability, which was also the last one, should be psychic shielding. Psychic shielding, as the name suggests, can shield and defend against all mental attacks. Of course, defense has its limits. Understanding the situation, Fang Ye breathed a sigh of relief. At least he didn't have to worry about Professor X's telepathy probing his memories and thoughts. Fang Ye also realized that the reason he only discovered 2 abilities before was that the 3rd one was a passive ability, whereas the first 2 were active abilities. It would be difficult for him to notice the 3rd ability until he experienced a mental attack and triggered the psychic shielding. With composure returning to his face, Fang Ye looked at Professor X, or rather, the mutant controlled by Professor X. Professor Charles, did you come here specifically to find me? Are you also interested in the human enhancement serum? Hehe, as Mr. Fang said, I did come for the human enhancement serum. I hope you can destroy it because it shouldn't exist in this world. Professor X didn't deny it and admitted openly. Fang Ye was well aware of Professor X's concerns. He was afraid that the human enhancement serum would fall into the hands of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the US military. If the US government formed a super soldier unit, mutants like him would undoubtedly be the first to suffer. Compared to supervillains, mutants were the real potential threat to the US government, given their significant numbers, which could challenge the current ruling power. Additionally, with Magneto causing trouble from time to time, the US government's attitude towards mutants could easily be imagined. That was also the reason why Mystique and Nightcrawler had secretly infiltrated Yi Tower in the past and stolen the data on the human enhancement serum. Both of them were mutants, and the human enhancement serum was of little use to them. Their goal had always been to destroy the serum. More accurately, Mystique and Nightcrawler had tried to steal the data on the serum's development, as destroying the serum wouldn't be effective as long as the data was still intact, and the serum could be redeveloped. Fang Ye furrowed his brows and sneered, Professor Charles, are you joking? Do you know how much I will lose if I destroy the serum? Mr. Fang, I apologize for this. We can compensate you as much as possible. Compensate? What do you have that's worth my attention? When it comes to money, you don't have more than I do, and when it comes to influence, my Yi fund is not inferior. What can you offer to compensate me? Facing Fang Ye's sarcastic remarks, Professor X fell silent. Fang Ye's words were harsh, but they were the truth. The X mansion didn't have anything worth Fang Ye's attention. As for money, the King of Finance, as Fang Ye was nicknamed, had more than enough, and when it came to influence, his Yi fund was also quite influential. What could Professor X offer as compensation? However, Professor X was determined to destroy the human enhancement serum because it posed a significant threat to mutants. If the US government obtained it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing Professor X's silence, Fang Ye softened his tone slightly. He didn't want to escalate the situation too much. He had already offended S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, so if he could avoid antagonizing the X-Mansion, he would try not to. Of course, that was under the premise of not compromising his interests. If Professor X insisted on destroying the serum, Fang Ye wouldn't hesitate to take action. He couldn't allow the serum to fall into the hands of the US government or any other government agency. Professor Charles, actually, your concerns are unnecessary because the human enhancement serum still has significant flaws. Moreover, the military has a similar serum. What you should really worry about is the military, not making trouble with me here. Fang Ye was indeed planning to divert the trouble elsewhere. He wasn't lying, as the military did have a similar serum. In the original story, before Emil Blinsky transformed into the Abomination, he had already injected himself with a super soldier serum, and he succeeded in fusing with it with a very low probability. Regarding the military's super soldier serum, its side effects were much smaller than those of the human enhancement serum, but not everyone could be injected with it, and the success rate was also very low. Relying on the super soldier serum to create a super soldier unit would come at an exorbitant cost, which would be far from proportional to the gains. That was also the reason why the military hadn't taken action yet. The human enhancement serum, on the other hand, had a much higher success rate, reaching over 30% success rate. This was why so many forces were paying attention to the human enhancement serum. Even compared to the Hulk serum, those forces were more interested in obtaining the human enhancement serum. After all, the success rate of fusing with the Hulk serum was far too low to create a Hulk warrior unit. The military also has a similar serum. Professor X visibly trembled, showing how surprised he was. That's impossible. I have been monitoring the military's movements closely, and if they had developed a super soldier serum, I couldn't possibly be unaware of it. Although they have been researching it, they haven't succeeded in many years. They must have succeeded recently, and I'm quite sure of that, Fang Ye said with confidence. In the original story, the military had indeed recently succeeded in developing a super soldier serum. Otherwise, what had Emil Blinsky injected himself with? Although Professor X's telepathic powers were powerful, even with the aid of instruments, he couldn't possibly monitor the military's movements all the time. It was understandable that he didn't know about the recent success of the military. The matter of the human enhancement serum, let's discuss it later. I need to go investigate whether the military really succeeded in developing a super soldier serum. But you need to assure me that the human enhancement serum won't fall into the hands of government forces. I can assure you that I won't give the serum to the US government, even if I have to destroy it. That's good. After Professor X left, the controlled mutant regained consciousness but appeared confused, not knowing what had just happened. Fang Ye furrowed his brows and waved his hand, and the mercenaries rushed into the warehouse. Professor X's departure relieved Fang Ye. Professor X's abilities were too troublesome to deal with. Although the underground research facility was equipped with a brainwave isolation device, Fang Ye wasn't entirely sure it could completely block Professor X's abilities. If it couldn't, Professor X could easily control the scientists inside to destroy the human enhancement serum. Fang Ye had already considered this situation, so to be safe, he had backup copies of the Hulk serum and human enhancement serum research data in case anything happened. As for the human enhancement serum, as long as the research data existed, it could be developed again after destruction. Perhaps because of this, Professor X treated Fang Ye politely. Regardless of his abilities, if Professor X couldn't radiate into the underground research facility, he wouldn't dare to act recklessly. If he really offended Fang Ye thoroughly, and Fang Ye sent the data to the military or S.H.I.E.L.D, the mutants would be in big trouble. Fang Ye turned to look at Mystique and smiled. Give my regards to Magneto. Thank him for his help this time. Mr. Fang, you're too kind. We are allies, after all. Of course. Fang Ye smiled confidently, and after a while, the mercenaries escorted the test subjects onto the vehicles. Fang Ye bid farewell to Mystique and Nightcrawler. Returning to Yi Tower, Fang Ye immediately called for Dr. Connors and handed over the test subjects to him for live experiments. Then, Fang Ye contacted Shillong and ordered him to gather mercenaries from all over the world to return to New York. Because in a week at most, Fang Ye would implement his plan to create his own team of super soldiers. Chapter 38, The Momentum Has Formed. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the underground research facility, in the meeting hall, Fang Ye stood with his hands behind his back, looking down at the 300 mercenaries of various races. On either side of Fang Ye stood 2 men. The man on Fang Ye's left was a young man in his mid-20s of Asian descent. His skin was slightly sickly pale, and his sharply defined face exuded a cold and handsome aura. His eyes were devoid of any emotion, and a chilling aura surrounded him. This young Asian man was none other than Fang Ye's right-hand man, codenamed Shulong. On Fang Ye's right stood a big, burly African-American man with a slightly overweight build. His face was full of humility, giving him a harmless appearance. However, none of the nearly 300 mercenaries present dared to underestimate him. Looking at him, a hint of fear could be seen in their eyes. The black man's name was Kakala, and like Shulong, he was also a mutant. Kakala possessed a very special ability, a form of psychic suggestion that induced deep hypnosis. It was precisely because of this ability that Fang Ye entrusted him with an important role and made him the leader of the 300 mercenaries. Through Kakala's occasional hypnotic brainwashing, Fang Ye had no worries about their loyalty. Because of this, Fang Ye was confident in creating his own super soldiers. Kakala, Shulong. Here. You two are mutants, so you don't need to take the human enhancing serum. Yes. Fang Ye looked at Shulong with doubt because only Kakala should have reacted to this, but Shulong remained silent. Seeing Fang Ye's gaze, Shulong seemed to have made some kind of decision. Boss, I want to take the human enhancing serum. You've decided. I've decided? I have nothing to tie me down in this world. If it weren't for you saving me and avenging me, there might not be a person like Shulong in this world now. Since you've made up your mind, then let Dr. Connors personally inject the serum into you. Thank you, boss. Fang Ye sighed inwardly, shaking his head gently. Mutants had an X gene in their bodies, and the success rate of injecting the serum into them was very low. The new human enhancing serum, which incorporated the genes of mutated lizards, had an almost less than 1,000th success rate for Shulong's injection. But it was Shulong's own choice, and Fang Ye respected his decision, even though he had to bear the consequences himself. Seeing Kakala nearby, seemingly hesitant, Fang Ye didn't wait for him to speak and put an end to his wishful thinking. Forget it, the human-enhancing serum is not suitable for you. Fang Ye attached great importance to Kakala because his ability was to hypnotically brainwash others. Fang Ye wanted to create super soldiers, and he couldn't afford to lose him. Fang Ye didn't want to go through all the trouble of cultivating super soldiers, only to have them eventually break free from his control. At this moment, Dr. Connors entered the meeting hall. Boss, everything is ready. Then let's begin. Fang Ye nodded and gave the order. Dr. Connors didn't disappoint Fang Ye. Within a week, he had reduced the side effects of the human-enhancing serum by 70%. With only 30% of the side effects remaining, Fang Ye believed the mercenaries should be able to withstand them. After all, these mercenaries had been engaged in warfare for a long time, experiencing real iron and blood, and their will and character were not comparable to ordinary people. When the time came, Dr. Connors led 10 mercenaries into the laboratory. Unfortunately, none of them succeeded in fusing with the serum, and they were eventually disposed of. Shu Long, you're the last one. Have you thought it through? Boss, my mind is made up. Shu Long's expression remained unwavering, even after witnessing the horrifyingly low success rate. He would not back down. Fang Ye glanced at Shu Long, knowing that further persuasion was useless, and waved his hand. Go. Yes. Mr. Shu Long, please? Let me personally inject the serum into you. Dr. Connors, thank you. Hehe, Mr. Shu Long, you're too polite. Dr. Connors led Shu Long into the laboratory. Fang Ye felt somewhat relieved that Connors himself was administering the injection. After waiting outside for 20 minutes, just when Fang Ye thought Shu Long had failed in the fusion, the laboratory door suddenly opened, and Dr. Connors walked out with a smile. Dr. Connors, did Shu Long succeed in the fusion? Boss, Mr. Shu Long's will is strong, and he successfully fused with the human-enhancing serum. Fang Ye breathed a sigh of relief. He valued Shu Long and the fact that he was the only Chinese among his subordinates. Of course, not long ago, out of the 300 mercenaries, there were 6 others besides Shu Long who were Chinese. Unfortunately, those 6 people all failed in fusing with the serum and had been laser dissected into a pile of meat, their remains thrown into some garbage bin. After waiting for another hour, under Shu Long's leadership, along with Shu Long himself, a total of 10 super soldiers walked out of the laboratory. Boss. The 10 of them showed respectful expressions and addressed him in unison. Very good, Shu Long, take them to the training room to familiarize themselves with their enhanced strength. Yes. Although there were far fewer than the initial estimate of 50, these 10 super soldiers, when equipped with the Green Devil suit, would give Fang Ye the confidence to face other forces head-on. After 2 years of hard work, Fang Ye's power had truly become formidable. The momentum had formed, the time had come. Now, Fang Ye only needed to successfully fuse with the Hulk serum. After that, his next step would be to figure out how to recruit Captain America and obtain the Cosmic Cube. But for now, Fang Ye needed to go to Oscorp Industries to equip Shu Long and the other 10 super soldiers with a set of Green Devil battle armors. With the Green Devil suits, Shu Long and the other 10 would be able to fully unleash their combat power. Chapter 39, Hydra Attacks. After Shu Long led 9 super warriors out of the conference hall and headed to the training room, Fang Ye waved his hand, allowing Dr. Connors and other scientists to leave first. In the empty conference hall, only Fang Ye and Kakala remained. With the success of the Super Warrior plan, the mercenary group was no longer necessary, and it was impossible for Kakala to continue being its leader. Fang Ye pondered for a moment and looked at Kakala. Kakala, from now on, you will be Shu Long's deputy. Cooperate with him in managing the Super Warrior team. Every 10 days, you must hypnotize and brainwash those Super Warriors. I don't want any rebellion in the future, understood? Yes. Kakala replied with a respectful expression. He had no objections to Fang Ye's arrangement. Fang Ye had given him and his family their lives, so his life belonged to Fang Ye long ago. Fang Ye nodded with a smile. He had no doubt about Kakala's loyalty, but he trusted Shu Long even more. Additionally, with the successful injection of the drug into Shu Long and the use of his stealth ability, Shu Long's strength was enough to suppress the other super warriors, making him suitable to lead the team. Kakala had special abilities, but his combat power was not that great. His true talent lay in being Shu Long's assistant and regularly using hypnosis and brainwashing on other super warriors, fully utilizing his abilities. Of course, Fang Ye had to remain cautious. Besides himself, he couldn't fully trust anyone else completely. Once Kakala's matters were arranged, Fang Ye left the research room, preparing to visit Osborne Industries. Recently, under Jennifer's management, Osborne Industries had gradually recovered its prosperity and was running smoothly. Although the stock price had not returned to its initial level, it was slowly rising. Fang Ye believed that within 3 months, Osborne Industries would be back to its former glory. Fang Ye didn't monopolize the benefits. The members who had received financing from the UI fund had all gained some profits, to some extent. With the possession of the human enhancement drug, Fang Ye no longer attached as much importance to Osborne Industries shares. He now controlled only 30% of the shares, while the rest had been distributed to those members. Apart from Norman Osborne, who was on the run, Fang Ye remained the largest shareholder of Osborne Industries. Since he couldn't obtain the shares in Norman Osborne's hands, Fang Ye planned to do some financing later. Once Norman Osborne was out of the picture, Fang Ye could do whatever he wanted with the company. On the streets of New York, a pale yellow sedan whizzed by, attracting the attention of many people. The sedan's pale yellow body glistened like a mirror, reflecting the shadows of people passing by. It was the limited edition top-level sedan recently launched by Osborne Industries, worth over $30 million. It's no wonder that many onlookers were envious. Inside the sedan, Fang Ye was resting with his eyes closed, while Deadpool looked bored, sitting next to him. For this visit to Osborne Industries, Fang Ye only brought Deadpool along. Stop the car. Fang Ye suddenly opened his eyes, feeling an intense sense of danger surging from within. His heart was filled with a strong premonition. The car abruptly came to a stop, shaking violently as the tires screeched against the asphalt, emitting a deafening, beast-like scream. Deadpool, get out of the car. Sensing the danger as well, Deadpool didn't hesitate. He grabbed Fang Ye's arm and tried to use his teleportation belt to escape. But to his surprise, the teleportation belt seemed to have malfunctioned, leaving him with no choice but to kick open the car door and jump out with Fang Ye. Boom, boom. Not long after they jumped out of the car, a rocket missile struck the sedan, transforming it into a massive ball of fire. The driver inside the sedan was clearly beyond rescue. Fang Ye's expression turned grim. How dare someone attack and assassinate him in broad daylight? Oh God, help. Quick, call for help. The sudden explosion alarmed the nearby crowd on the street, and cries for help echoed in the air. Let's go. Fang Ye's face changed dramatically as he felt a tremendous sense of crisis approaching. Although he trusted his precognitive abilities, he had already sensed the danger even before Deadpool reminded him. Without any hesitation, Fang Ye shouted at Deadpool and charged forward, seeking shelter in a nearby convenience store. Deadpool followed suit, and as they reached the store, the street they were on became the target of a rain of bullets. Countless bullets struck the ground, turning it into a pockmarked battlefield. Fang Ye's eyes gleamed coldly. He knew that they couldn't keep this up. As long as Winter Soldier Bucky was holding them back, they had no chance of breaking through. Boss, we seem to be surrounded. Deadpool calmly pointed out the obvious, not concerned about himself but more worried about Fang Ye's safety. Fang Ye, however, had already foreseen this situation. They were clearly well prepared, disabling the spatial movement belt and setting up numerous ambushes with heavy weaponry, making it almost impossible for them to escape. Moreover, Winter Soldier Bucky's strength was not to be underestimated. He could suppress Captain America, making him a formidable opponent, and Fang Ye was no match for him. Go and kill him, Deadpool. Fang Ye's eyes flashed with coldness. He knew that this situation couldn't continue. If Deadpool could kill Bucky, they might have a chance to escape. Otherwise, they would be doomed. Indeed, it was more accurate to say that Fang Ye would be doomed, as Deadpool had an immortal body and couldn't be killed even if he wanted to. Due to the slow reaction time of ordinary people, Fang Ye and Deadpool could dodge the attacks for now. However, Bucky's reaction speed was almost as fast as Fang Ye's, leaving them no chance to break through. All right. Deadpool's face was filled with murderous intent. He had been hit by a stray bullet earlier, which meant his year-end bonus was gone. How could he accept that? His heart was bleeding, feeling the pain in every organ. Killing Bucky was not just about avenging themselves, it was also about relieving the public's anger. After Deadpool left, Fang Ye didn't hesitate any longer. Chapter 40, Black Widow. As Deadpool charged toward Bucky, Fang Ye didn't look back. He turned and fled in the opposite direction. Letting Deadpool deal with Bucky wasn't just to vent his anger, it was to restrain Bucky. Only by doing so, Fang Ye would have a chance to escape. Bang bang bang. Clang clang clang. The rapid sound of bullets being fired and the clang of metal colliding echoed through the air. Deadpool ran through the hail of bullets and, in the blink of an eye, had covered a distance of over 30 meters, rapidly approaching Bucky. Around Deadpool, flashes of blade glimmers and two sharp blades danced, impenetrable and bulletproof. Within a 10-meter radius, bullets couldn't get close. Bucky's attention was indeed drawn by Deadpool. The strength Deadpool displayed made it impossible for Bucky to take him lightly. Moreover, Deadpool was clearly charging directly at him. Bucky adjusted his aim and decisively fired a rocket at Deadpool. Deadpool moved to the side, narrowly avoiding the rocket. Boom! The rocket hit a car behind Deadpool, causing an explosion that sent 3 or 4 Hydra members flying 5 or 6 meters away, unable to escape the blast. After landing, their bodies twitched a few times and fell silent, clearly dead. Damn! Deadpool cursed in his heart and had to slow down to avoid the attacks. As he did so, other Hydra members also reacted, turning their guns toward him. Boom boom boom. 7 or 8 rockets, carrying scorching heat, were shot at Deadpool. Although he managed to dodge them in time, he was still blown over by the shockwaves. However, Deadpool's distraction gave Fang Ye a chance, and he had already broken out of the encirclement and run 50 meters away while being pursued relentlessly by Hydra members. The bullets were dense, and occasional snipers took shots at him, making Fang Ye's escape extremely difficult. Thud. Fang Ye moved quickly from side to side, dodging and breaking through, but the bullets were too dense, and he couldn't evade in time, resulting in a splash of blood on his shoulder. However, when the bullets touched his skin, Fang Ye controlled his muscles to grip the bullets tightly. He performed a roll on the ground, hiding under a truck. He grabbed the car door and tore it off, using it as a shield to protect himself. Clang clang clang. With the car door as protection, Fang Ye's speed increased significantly. After a while, the car door was riddled with bullet holes and had to be discarded. The Hydra members had learned their lesson and didn't give Fang Ye a chance to find another makeshift shield. Gradually, Fang Ye was hit by more and more bullets, and his body was soaked in blood. If he hadn't injected himself with body-enhancing drugs that surpassed human limits, Fang Ye would have died long ago. Crack. After enduring 3 bullet hits, Fang Ye reached a Hydra member. Without waiting for the opponent's reaction, Fang Ye twisted the man's neck with his right hand and took an automatic rifle with his left hand. Fang Ye's hand-to-hand combat ability was ordinary, but his marksmanship was pretty good. With the automatic rifle in hand, Fang Ye swiftly counterattacked, headshotting Hydra members with each precise shot. However, there were too many Hydra operatives, and the rifle's magazine ran out quickly. But during this time, Fang Ye had already broken out of the encirclement, covered in blood, and rushed out. After breaking free, Fang Ye didn't return to Wall Street, nor did he head to Osborne Industries. Instead, he randomly chose a path to escape. Fang Ye didn't know if Hydra had other ambushes waiting for him. Who knew if there were ambushes on the way back or on the path to Osborne Industries? If there were, he would be walking right into a trap. Though injured, Fang Ye was much faster than an ordinary person. After a while, he shook off the pursuers behind him. Huff. As Fang Ye was running at high speed, he suddenly felt a sense of crisis and heard the sound of something cutting through the air. Fang Ye rolled to the side, and a flying knife passed just above his head, sticking into the nearby wall. The blade was buried in the wall, leaving only the handle shaking slightly. Fang Ye quickly stood up after a carp jump and looked warily to his left. Out of the dim alleyway, 2 men and a woman walked out. The woman was naturally Natasha, and the man, with a quiver on his back and a bow and arrow in his hand, was none other than the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Hawkeye. Fang Ye's expression slightly darkened. The 3 of them were formidable, and it seemed that escaping wouldn't be so easy. Suddenly they heard a voice with a tone of ridicule. Hi, ganging up on one person with many, how childish. Several spider webs shot out, entangling Hawkeye's bow staff. Seeing this chance, Fang Ye kicked Hawkeye away. At this moment, a figure in red and blue fell from the sky and landed next to Fang Ye. A/N, consider giving some power stones for this novel, your support is my motivation.